I'd like to invite my chaplain to say a few words first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. How good it is to be here again, isn't it? All those wonderful smiling faces. And it's almost summer, I'm told. And you can all look forward to no meetings, I'm told, in August. So you'll all come back rested and refreshed. Rested and refreshed in September, but quite a lengthy agenda, I understand, tonight. So may I just lead you in a short prayer. Father God, I pray for those who exercise authority in government, especially in this place where we live. I ask that tonight you would give them wisdom, patience and stamina in the face of a lengthy and potentially contentious agenda. Help them to recognise that the things that they have in common are of greater worth than those on which they differ. Deepen their understanding of one another's needs and respect for one another's opinions, and unite them in the common cause of serving the communities of this town. So now I ask that you would direct and strengthen them in all their work and planning, and as the meeting comes to an end, a safe journey home and a deep and restful sleep. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Please be seated. You've got 5 minutes. Welcome, everyone. We'll start tonight with the apologies for absence. Have I got any? Okay, Councillor Bound, please, first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Cubitt and Councillor Putty.
Councillor Gavin James.
Apologies for Councillor Ron Hussey. Councillor Keith Watts is on his way. He's about 20 minutes away as we speak. Thank you.
Number 2, have we got any declarations of interest? Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10 references plot O. My employer has a relationship with that piece of land, so I will absent myself from the meeting at that point. I also have a declaration in item 20 of the Cabinet meeting on the 13th of June. It also refers to my employer.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a trustee of the Leisure Park, so I might take. I've had guidance, and I haven't got to leave the room for item 9, so there's no conflict of interest. But I've just thought I'd mention it.
And I understand a number of people might have an interest in item 18. If they can indicate now. Okay, what we're going to do is do a recorded vote so we make sure we get everyone. So if you've got an interest, say yes. If you haven't, say no. But if everyone can vote so that we know. Councillor Pearce? Oh, we're doing a recorded vote. You can't use the mics while the vote's on. we- Okay. Okay, thank you. I thought it'd just be slightly easier to recorded vote. Yeah, normally it's to bring it closer. Yeah. Someone's been playing with the sound since I was last here. Okay, the 11th and 18th of May. Are they agreed? Item number 4 is the Mayor's announcements. Sorry, I've got quite a few. After the recent events in London and Manchester, I wrote to the Mayors to send our condolences on behalf of the borough. The second thing I'd like to bring up, I was fortunate enough to go to St Leonard's Church for their anniversary earlier this year. And normally you wouldn't mention a mayoral event, but it was their 900th anniversary. And I was just so pleased to be a mayor of a borough with such history that I thought I'd mention it. It makes me very proud when you can see things that have been around for that long. The Festival of Sport, unfortunately, I lost the Mayor's Challenge and we lost the competition against the Germans. So hopefully Sean will go and get the trophy back for us next year in Germany. I received a letter from Bill Sample, retiring from the British Legion and helping us with the remembrance services. He's given 21 years service to this council, helping us out. So I wrote a letter to thank him. I'd like to also thank Roger Gardner, who represented me at the Basingstoke role, and they really appreciated you being there. So thank you very much. Later on in the year, in September, I will be taking part in a Moonlight Walk, which helps raise money for St Michael's Hospice. As many of you know, I lost my father to cancer and he died in St Michael's Hospice. There is a virginmoneygiving.com/Paul Frankham if anyone would like to make a donation for that. Or if anybody wants to join me in the walk, they'd be most welcome. I missed the variety show will be on the 7th of October, and they've just announced who the compere is going to be for the evening, and it's Steve Hewlett, who was the finalist on British Got Talent and the ventriloquist, and apparently he might be doing a bit of banter and taking the mickey out of a bit, so it's definitely well worth going to the show. Tickets are still available. Right, next thing I'll bring up is Jane Austen. I've had so many people from all over the world stop me and thank me for the work to celebrate Jane Austen's event that I need to send thanks. Must go to the whole of the Jane Austen's Project Committee, chaired by Maria Miller, for developing the idea, commissioning the sculpture and organising the fundraising. To Adam Round, the local artist and ex-student of BCOT, who produced the work, and to other officers of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, facilitating the project and the installation, as well as the unveiling ceremony. And some of the people that came up to thank me were from the American arm of the Jane Austen Appreciation Society, the Australian arm of Jane Austen Appreciation Society. So it's really put us on the world map. So well done everyone involved. My final announcement is great honour to announce the Pride 245. I've got a few words. A young gentleman wrote to the previous mayor and asked why we didn't have a pride parade. So the previous mayor got a few people together that thought they would be able to take it forward in the mayor's parlour. And they've run with it and really started to go. So I'll read out a quick statement. Today marks 50 years since the homosexual was partially decriminalised in England and Wales. It should be celebrated, but it wasn't a sweeping reform which immediately transformed the lives of gays and bisexual men. It did start a movement of LGBT rights that has continued through the 5 decades. There is so much to do to end homophobia and transphobia, bullying in our schools and hate crimes in our communities. and that all politicians have a role to play to end all discrimination on grounds of sexuality or gender identity. It is with this in mind that I'm pleased to announce that Pride 245 will be holding a series of Pride events during the third week of September. Details of the events will soon be made public and available on their website, pride245.org.uk. As Mayor, I would like everyone in the Chamber to support the important work within our borough to educate, celebrate and embrace inclusivity. So that's all my announcements. Thank you. Yeah, as it's quite warm, any gentlemen who wish to remove their coat, they may do so. Yeah. Thanks, man. Reception. Have you got any announcements there? No. Okay. Questions from members of the public? There are none. Petitions? There are none. So we're down to resignations and appointments. Have we got any appointments or resignations to committees? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As per the order paper, Councillor James to replace Councillor Loney on CEP.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Okay. Item B, to receive resignations for outside bodies. First of all, there's the Basingstoke Youth Action Trust Limited. There's one vacancy. Are there any nominees? No. Okay. So, Vine Community School Community Management Committee, 2 appointings. Are there any nominees? Councillor Harvey.
Can I nominate myself and Councillor James?
Is that agreed? Great, thank you. Item 8. Arrangements for dealing with complaints involving councillors. I'd like to move the recommendation. And have I got a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move an amendment to this recommendation and paper that the matter is referred to the Constitutional Working Party for further consideration. Having had consultation and raised issues of concern, they have not been addressed by the paper as far as the Labour Group is concerned. We continue to have concerns about the manner in which the paper has been produced and wish to engage constructively on that. Therein, moving this whole paper to the Constitutional Working Party, as per the other elements of the Constitution that are being reviewed by that body, would be appropriate, such that cross-party we can reach an agreement to bring this back positively with all of the other constitutional changes that we would seek to make together at the same time in the right place, such that all concerns can be addressed from all sides of the chamber and that we are not simply dismissed for having them in the first place. They are relevant, they are genuine, they are meant with reason, they were given to the officers have considered them. We still need to continue that conversation. That is why I move the amendment this evening, Mr Mayor, that we would like this matter referred to the Constitutional Working Party such that we can constructively bring it completely back to this chamber at the appropriate time.
Have I got a seconder? Do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I mean, the arrangements for dealing with complaints were discussed by the Working Party last July, and Councillor Putty was the only borough representative on the Working Party. Yet, as a member of the Standards Committee, I actually only had sight of the revised procedures a week before the committee meeting in November, and that gave no time for discussion with my group prior to the meeting. I didn't support the changes at the meeting, and I still don't, in particular changes to the appeal process. We see the changes as imposing additional hurdles that members would have to jump over in order to trigger an appeal. According to the stats referred to earlier in the report, just one complaint was received in relation to Borough Councillor in the 12-month period. And so to add additional steps to generate an appeal seems to us to be overkill. I note that 16 of the total complaints related to parish councillors. We should perhaps ask what can be done to address that issue. In relation to appeals, the order in which points 9.3 and 9.4 will be in the report we see in a minute are written concerning the process, and in my opinion it could be read as the monitoring officer alone is making the decision. I would suggest that we consider taking another look at this, as this amendment says, considering that the delay in bringing this to council was meant that another full year of stats are now available to us. Thank you.
Anybody, Councillor Eaches?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I've seconded the paper, so I agree with the recommendation and think we need to approve that recommendation. only got very minimal things to say. I think paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3 of the report sum everything up. The reason this paper came about was following a meeting with members of Standards Committee, which included Peter Moore, Councillor Putty, Keith Bassin and Councillor Fryer, and it was at that meeting where these improvements came. This has been discussed, it has come to a committee, and I think we need to push this through tonight, have a vote, take the recommendation. That will, as per paragraph 3, improve the effectiveness of the arrangements, and then there's absolutely no issue with this then being discussed by the Constitutional Working Party moving forward, and I have discussed that with Bhupinder, who has agreed that, and so I suggest that we take the recommendation and that we still then discuss this further at the Constitutional Working Party moving forward.
Well, we've actually got an amendment on the floor, so we need to debate that. Is there anybody who wants to debate the amendment? Councillor Harvey to sum up.
Thank you. The reason for bringing this back was that there was no feedback from Councillor Putty. There was no feedback to members. It took us picking the issue up and running it with officers in order to make the concerns raised, to put them in the first place, really. And those concerns haven't been addressed. We've made reference to them this evening in terms of seconding the motion, the amendment. I mean, you can push this through by all means, but the point being that to take it to the Constitutional Working Party, having approved it, to then bring changes back is fairly daft when you should send it to the Constitutional Working Party to make constructive changes that we can all agree with cross-party, across the chamber. You know, in a sense, to push it through now would be surreal if we're then going to change it again. Let's do the work. Let's look at this legitimately alongside the other constitutional issues that matter. It is also fair and an important point that when Councillor Putty cast his actual vote as the chair of the committee for that particular item, that caused a constitutional issue because the matter was disagreed on the floor of that committee. There was a vote one way and there was a vote another. And it took the chair of the Standards Committee to step out of the chair for that moment to allow Councillor Putty to step into the chair to use a casting vote to carry them as you see them tonight. Now, that is an issue, because while to the letter, that was the manner in which it was carried out on the evening, the constitutional issue of that, of a sitting chair at the meeting, actually in the room at the time, leaving the chair to enable the vice chair to push the thing through, does raise a constitutional point. The other matters that we've raised, quite legitimately around the appeals process and the other elements of this, are legitimate. Let's not rush on with this in the manner of just simply rubber stamping it tonight. Let us give this consideration. That's all we're saying. It's already been agreed that this goes to the Constitutional Working Party, I hope. So let's them do the job. Let's do the piece of work and be constructive about it, cross-party. Because we don't support what's here at the moment. And I think that would be a shame if we go down this road absolutely this evening. Let us have that sensible conversation in an appropriate place, and that is the Constitutional Working Party.
Okay, we'll now move to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please indicate by raising a hand. And all those against? Okay, that was 29 against and 24, so the amendment is lost. So we now go back to the substantive motion. Does anybody want to speak on it? Councillor Harvey.
That's regrettable, and I think in terms of this, I do note that the chair of the Standards Committee isn't here even to speak upon the papers that's presented, nor is Councillor Putty here, who has previously put the papers from the Standards Committee. There is nobody to question on this evening, nobody to raise the matters with. Yet again, another constitutional point about how we deal with standards in this chamber and in this council. I don't think we can support this, and I stand up regrettably to say that I will have to vote against the recommendation that this is carried, because it isn't appropriate, it isn't right, and it should be debated before we agree this.
Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For the last 4 years, I suffered a campaign of harassment by 2 individuals, which has resulted in 5 different complaints against me, 4 as a parish councillor and 1 as a borough councillor. The last two were found a finding of I brought my office into disrepute for standing up to a foul-mouthed bully at a parish council meeting, and the other one is even more farcical because it dealt with I'd raised an issue of potential fraud against this council, and instead of dealing with that, the councils seemed more interested in harassing me. They found a decision notice, found that I brought my office into disrepute, but when you looked at the details of it, it was completely wrong. I'd been given that advice by the head of our legal department, but they claimed that they can't change the decision notice because there's no right of appeal. And on the other one, it then turned out that actually they hadn't even looked at my appeal. They looked at the wrong paperwork, which I told them all the way through, but that was ignored. That was supposed to have been dealt with, and I was advised I would be given an answer on that on the 26th of March by the Deputy Monitoring Officer, who hasn't been seen since. That's the system we've got, and if any of you want to be subject to that, then you're more fool you, because it is totally unfit for purpose. It does not deal with the real issues, it harasses councillors, it takes up a lot of officers' time and it costs a fortune. You recall I asked a question about this about 2 meetings ago. We don't even know how much this system costs, and the vast majority of the problems come from parish councils, yet we're the ones who have to pay for them. This system does not work, it's not fit for purpose, it's like someone out of Kafka meets Alice in Wonderland. It's absolutely disgraceful. The old system, at least for the standards board, there was some overarching control of the system. The system we got now, there is no control. There isn't even a process in there as to how the system even works. One of the amendments in there is the fact that you can actually speak to the independent person. That's there because I raised that, because I became aware of it, just as a matter of course. But when I tried to do that, I was told I didn't know what I was talking about. It was incorrect, they wouldn't do it, and then they decided to deal with the complaint anyway, in my absence. Then they offered to let me speak to the independent person after the complaint had been dealt with, which is completely farcical. Now, that's the system we're using at the moment. If you think that's good, if you want to be subject to that, then you need your heads testing. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak? I'll move to that, to vote. All those in favour of the motion, show, please indicate. And all those against? That's 29 for and 21 against, so that motion's carried. Item 9, the leisure management arrangements. Councillor Simon Bound to move.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce this report looking into the leisure management arrangements for the Aquadrome, Golf Centre, Totally Tennis and the Tadley Pool for 2018 and beyond. These recommendations show a commitment from our council, the Trust, Serco and Totally Tennis to delivering high-quality customer service, a commitment to maintaining and enhancing the facilities, and a significantly improved and guaranteed management fee. This is achieved by approving an extension to these contracts and whilst also approving an additional of over £1.5 million to the capital programme provision to fund essential maintenance works. This agreement does much to improve the financial position for us as a council, deliver improved facilities for families and offer some certainty to all parties. I would like to take this opportunity to thank officers for their hard work in securing these enhanced terms and provision of facilities, and also thank the elected members who participated in the All Members Advisory Panel for their positive response to these proposals as they have developed. Also, thanks must be extended to our partners who have worked hard to come up with a set of very exciting proposals. They do much to offer our residents more of the leisure facilities that they want. I note that Councillor Harvey has tabled an amendment focusing on the times of access for concessionary prices within the facilities operated by the Trust and Serco. I know maintaining the low price for gym membership for low-income earners of £6.70 per month has been a significant challenge, but we have achieved it. This element and how usage times for all users can be managed as part of an effective leisure facility management approach has been a key item of the discussions, but I am happy to accept this amendment to work with our officers and partners to see what can be achieved. But I would also ask Councillor Harvey to acknowledge keeping this very low level of pricing is a significantly positive result of the negotiations by our officers. Increasing levels of participation and physical activity for all our residents and the benefit this brings, I know, is a focus for us both.
I understand Councillor Edwards is going to second. Do you want to speak now or hold your right?
Speak now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was fortunate to be a member of the MAP and therefore worked closely with the portfolio holder and the council officers to produce the report. I'd just like to say thank you to them for all their hard work. As Councillor Bowen said, during the discussions, the proposals received supports from all parties, and therefore I second the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, I understand you want to move an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In standing up to move the amendment, can I thank the portfolio holder for his words in terms of accepting the premise of where we're coming from on this. When you think about the leisure park and think about the importance that it holds in the town, accessibility to the services that are there is a critical part of it for the whole community. And as a result of that, and acknowledging the price element, you must also acknowledge the ability for people to use the services in the first place. And that's the concern that we raise in the sense of a limitation or a constraint that may well be something that is not fair and not appropriate. And that injustice in an element is which we raise here this evening. And thank you for taking it away to consider it. And we look very much to work with you on that. Because what we want to see of our leisure park is that the town can be proud of it. And it isn't just attracting people that come from far and wide, but the people who live here, who actually pride the leisure park for what it is, our aquadrome, our ice rink, and all those facilities that people enjoy, the bowls club, the rest of it, milestones, everything, is a key part of our town in terms of what we offer our residents, all of them. And that is very much our focus, which I hear and appreciate the Cabinet member shares. I also thank the officers for the work they've done on this in bringing this forward in terms of the negotiations. Negotiations are never easy, and in achieving results that matters, and I thank our officers for their work on that respect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the amendment as such.
And I understand Councillor Cousins is going to second that. You can speak now or hold your right.
I'll speak now, please, Mr. Mayor. It's just a very short contribution, which is very simply that sport and fitness should be something that is inclusive. Indeed, it's something that we had as one of our values of hosting the 2012 Olympic Games, that sport and fitness is an inclusive activity, and the restriction in there at the moment doesn't do that. So it's a very simple request. Please, can we go away, look at it, think again, is there an opportunity to scrap what is currently there? Otherwise, it is a fantastic paper which I'm very happy to support, apart from that one section which I'd like to go away and have a think about. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Does anybody want to speak on the amendment? Right, okay. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Unanimous, I think. That's the amendment carried. Now to the substantial motion. Is anybody want to speak on that? Okay, we'll move to the vote on that. Would anyone please indicate, should I show of hands, for? Yes, Councillor Regan, I think that's his hand. Okay. That's agreed. Oh. Let's hope it continues. Number 10, revenue and capital outturn for 2016-2017. Councillor Tate to put the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members will note from the report that's in this evening's documents that there is continued accuracy in the outturn against the forecasts for 2016-17. Expenditure with a variance of 0.3% and income with a variance of 0.1%. Within the report, we can see that capital expenditure was 22% less than budget at 6.4 million against an 8.25 million pound budget. And this is down to the delays and rephrasing of some key projects with ESPs, town centre improvements, parking and access schemes, the asset management plan and ICT replacement. But this is a clear rephasing into subsequent years. However, capital delivery in 2016 also included some key projects for our community. Tadley Youth Centre, the Sherborne Pavilion, Hatchwarren Community Centre, Newton Village Hall, Buckskin Church and the Play Park at Wootton St Lawrence were all part of the 2016 delivery. In addition, 182 disabled facility grants at value of £1.1 million were also made. There were 10 lift projects which were completed and 40 new parking spaces were added. The ability to deliver these projects and grants is a clear and direct response to the ability of this Council to maintain a close financial control and an accurate investment over time. And I want to offer my thanks to all the officer staff who have enabled this, whether directly within finance or more generally through their work within the Council to deliver the strong, cost-effective and valuable services for the borough. In conclusion, I'd ask the Council notes the financial data in the report, including the capital expenditure and reserve contributions, and approves the rephasing of capital expenditure as in Appendix 10.
Thank you. Councillor Isaac, to a seconder. You're reserving your right, or do you want to speak slow? Okay, thank you. Councillor Potter indicated he'd like to speak on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Tate for his report. He has referred to a couple of things which I want to go back on. I mean, I think there's a wider issue in this report which we need to look at. And as he says, there's around 20% of the capital budget for 2016-17 that was unspent because of delays. As he says again, this is around 1.8 million in delayed spend from a total budget of around 8.2 million. That's laid out on page 151, I think. Clearly, we have the Cabinet's promise that the delayed expenditure will be rephased, but we have got delays on a number of issues that affect the day-to-day well-being of residents. For example, parking schemes, play areas, sports facilities, and in my own ward, Chinham House is another significant project that is subject to severe delays. 20% of expenditure being delayed is a significant proportion, and I'd urge the portfolio holder to review this with the Chief Executive in case there are any internal blockages that could be unblocked. Specifically in relation to Chinham House, let me tell you, this is a project to convert this part-listed building into units of living accommodation for general needs. We sought originally to get it allocated for community use. Over 2 years ago, we secured a commitment from the then portfolio holder and relevant director that included in the scheme would be a small community room together with a separate access with lift platform for members of the community with disabilities. A reasonable provision, I'm sure you would all agree. I supported the planning and listed building applications at the time based on that commitment. We are now told that this commitment will be abandoned under the latest scheme negotiated with Mears, who will have exclusive use of the room as a so-called office. The words used by officers to me in respect to the community room and access have been, "It is difficult to justify the cost of such a provision." Difficult to justify to who, I ask? This is an outrageous breach of faith to the community of Popley and discredits this council, or more accurately, this administration. In simple terms, we have a 20% underspend on the capital budget, but we can't justify providing for those who have a disability and would wish to use a small community facility in a council-owned building in Popley. Quite unacceptable, I think you will agree. I ask the relevant portfolio holders, plural, to work together on this to make sure the commitment previously made on this matter is fulfilled. I'm putting it very simply, if we can subsidise an American billionaire to build a hotel in Basingview, we can keep our commitments to the people of Popley on this matter.
Councillor Watts, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to talk on page 163, little 3, about the continuing delay at Westside Community Centre. As the council knows, the community centre is a thriving centre, but the building is over 50 years old and it's beginning to get a bit run down and starting to creak at the seams. The roof has been an ongoing issue with this council for nearly 5 years now, and it's impacting the viability of this centre. And it was exacerbated last week in last week's storms when we actually had another flood at the centre. We were actually present at the time, and some of our colleagues had to help out bail out the kitchen where it was flooded. So the community centre are actually exacerbated, and they actually wrote to the council this week. And I just wonder if the portfolio holder can use his considerable influence to speed this whole process along, because it's totally unacceptable, and quite frankly, we've had long enough waiting for these reworks of the and the replacement roof. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, referring to page 156, I'm interested to know why the ESP scheme doesn't apply south of the railway line. In other words, no agreement with Sovereign, but you've got an agreement with Sentinel. And secondly, on page 157, under the portfolio holder's comments, can you confirm that what is said there is now done?
Okay. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a brief question on page 169 on. I had a brief question on page 169 on parking. I noticed that the parking amounts there are going up quite significantly, but I guess they don't yet include the work that's been done by the CEP committee. So will further provision be made if the CEP committee recommends an acceleration of the parking programme, where some of our residents potentially might have to wait another 40 years for their schemes to be done?
Okay, I've got no one else wishing to speak. I'll ask, Councillor Isaac.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to recommend that we support this report. I think it's a commendable result at a time when local government finances across this country are under huge pressure. I think that it demonstrates good and improving budget control. I know that a lot of our residents are very happy with the work that we're doing through the Local Infrastructure Fund, that we're returning money to them so that they can carry out important and very useful community projects. As far as the points made by Councillor Potter are concerned, I'm the portfolio holder responsible for Chinham House. I am aware of your concerns about Chinham House. I know that a meeting is, I think, proposed with officers to discuss your concerns. I would make the point that we are waiting for a report from officers. Things have changed a lot in relation to Chinham House because there's a lot of problems with it. It's a listed building. It's got structural problems. I think there's been a change in proposed housing association partner there. We're keen to hear your views, and those will be fed in, I'm sure, into the report that I receive from officers so that we can take it forward. But I agree, there's been a delay on this, and we need to get a move on with it. Finally, I would just make the point that we do need to look at this report in the context of, as I say, the bigger picture for local authorities. We're doing very well. According to a recent LGIU report, some local authorities may be forced to declare technical insolvency in the next few years. So, while it's a notable and a testament to our strong financial management here that we're still able to maintain excellent services for residents, the pressures are continuing to build up on our finances and will intensify in the years ahead.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Tate to please sum up? Councillor Potter?
Sorry, as I've been named by a councillor, very kindly, could I just...
Have you been misquoted?
Well, could I just provide a piece of information? Would that be permitted by you, Mr. Mayor? It's simply in regard to what Councillor Isaac has said about the work that's been going on with Chinham House and the substantial changes to the original brief. Let me put it on record. We have sought for months and months as local representatives to be involved in this process, and it's only within the last 2 or 3 weeks that we've been engaged on this, only to be told, of course, at that juncture that the revised applications relating to this cut out the community provision which I've mentioned, and also that the cost constraints were going to lead to the conclusion I've mentioned tonight. We have been excluded from the process. We will engage fully now, but we are the ones that have prompted that. We have been cut out of the process in the last months. I can only say that as a point of record, because that is the simple fact of it.
It's not. I'll leave you to talk outside this office. Councillor, to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is regrettable that we can't achieve a budget capital expenditure every year on time, but sometimes these things are outside of our direct control. And within that budget underspend for this year, of the 2016-17 year, 750,000 revolves around budget allocation for ESPs. My understanding is that progress is being made on that particular project. The direct question was it completed in May 2017? I don't believe it has been completed yet, but it's well on the way to being completed. Other elements of the underspend, £278,000 were have been rephased. This is not about missing; it's just about phasing in terms of when work can be done. So in particular, some of the work within the town centre is rephased work, which will be achieved, I believe, in 2017-18. One area in particular, 150,000 for the town centre development, has been moved to support the parking in terms of development of the parking offering. So whilst it is, nothing is directly, there's no loss in this. This is about how it's going to be phased, and sometimes, as I say, this is outside of the control. As far as the parking development of additional parking spaces is concerned, I believe that's coming to committee in November, and I'm certainly waiting to see the result of that particular CEP, I think it is, that what the outcome of that meeting is, and what proposals, and see how we can help speed up the development of parking spaces, because it is an important issue for residents. At the end of the day, as Councillor Isaac has said, and he has dealt with the Chinham House, so I think it's probably best to come from him. At the end of the day, this is a very difficult time for local authority budgeting. We are achieving good results, not just in fiscal accuracy, which is very, very pleasing, but ultimately we are delivering services and additional grants and additional support for the communities, and that, I think, is the most important thing that comes out of this outturn report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll put that to vote. Everyone in favour, please indicate. Looking. All right. Everybody's in favour of the motion. Would they please indicate by raising their hands? Someone's not about the sounds. I didn't see that. Thank you. All those against? Okay, that is carried. Any abstentions? Noted. Item 11, East of Basingstoke and Redlands Development Brief Supplementary Planning Document. Councillor Mark Raffel to move.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation, it's page 179, agenda item 11, that we adopt as supplementary planning document the East of Basingstoke and Redlands Development Brief. If I have a seconder, then I'll speak more, please.
Councillor Christian Robinson was down for me to second this.
Mr. Mayor, can I begin by thanking all of those who participated in the creation of this document, the residents, various interest groups, the ward councillors. There are 3 lots of them because the area covers 3 wards, and the officers who have worked tirelessly to get this document ready. Unfortunately, this document is not complete, as I would have liked it to have been, and indeed in similar areas that we've looked at, we have had the documents complete. We are waiting for Hampshire County Council to conduct their transport assessment and to provide us with it, and for them to provide their heritage assessment. We can't wait for them. Planning applications are presumably coming soon, but we do have an undertaking from them that their assessments will come soon and before those planning applications are determined. With that in mind, I undertake that the transport assessment and the heritage assessment will be shared with those same ward members who've contributed to this planning document so far, and the comments that they may be, well, they'll be invited to make comment, but their comments will be taken into account going forward. So that's my recommendation to the Council, to adopt this supplementary planning document.
Thank you. Do you want to speak now or reserve your right? Okay, thank you. Anybody who wants to speak on this motion? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions on pages 214 and 216. Page 214, the public transport. Would the portfolio holder agree that one of the best ways we could improve public transport in the northeast of the town and out into the surrounding rural areas is to build a station at Chinham? And page 216, strategic improvements to the A33, future-proofing. While I'm pleased to see improvements to the Taylor's Farm roundabout, as someone who now has to endure the A33 on a daily basis going to work in Reading, would he also agree that further strategic improvements are needed, viz. Making the A33 a dual carriageway?
Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor, even.
Yeah.
I just put my glasses on in time. So it's the surname that gets me before the first name. Mr. Mayor, can I say that neither of those questions actually arise out of this, but I will answer both of them.
We're debating, so you can do it in the summing up. Or no,
well, let's ask me a question.
Yeah, you're allowed to ask questions before the debate.
If you don't want me to answer, I won't, but I'm happy to answer. Can I say, I do agree that all things being equal, if we could have a station at Chinham, that would be a great advantage to the residents of Chinham, Sherfield Park, to this area to the east of Basingstoke, which will have potentially 900 homes. I think that the advantage would be to bring them swiftly into Basingstoke, where many advantages lie, including, of course, getting out of Basingstoke to London quickly. It would also enable them to go swiftly into Reading, where there's other sources of employment. I'm not being asked, but I'll venture to suggest the likelihood of a station being built at Chinham, it remains remote, due to the high use of that line with freight transport and with other passenger services, with cross-country rail networks who are trying to expand their cross-country network linking Bournemouth to the north and northeast of the country. And I think it's therefore highly unlikely at the moment that a further stop on that line could be built, which would build in more delays to those other services. However, that won't stop us pressing for it and looking at alternative solutions to relieving the pressure on that line if possible. And indeed, I can say I had a discussion with Network Rail on this very subject today. In relation to the A33, yes, there do need to be highway improvements. That is an ongoing process. The balance, of course, with that is to make sure that we don't just create improvements for the through traffic that wants to get from to the north via the A33 to the south, because it is my view, and I know that a number of you share this, that, Mr. Mayor, that if we make that road wider and faster, the traffic will flow onto it and use it and fill it even quicker than it does at the moment. That's not to say that the ongoing improvements don't need to be made, but we need a better solution that deals with connecting the traffic from Reading onto the M3 and possibly avoids going through the very area around Chinham and Stratford-Turgis in the first place.
Anybody else wish to ask questions, or should we go to debate? Okay, anybody want to debate the motion? Okay. Councillor Raffel, to sum up, please.
Mr Mayor, I beg to move the recommendation. I thank Councillor Cormack for his questions.
Okay. Everybody for the motion, would you please indicate by right? Oh, do you want to use? I forgot to ask if you wanted to use your second to speech. Oh, sorry. Anybody wishing to... sorry, it's all right, you throw me now. Everybody in favour of this motion, please indicate by raising your hands. That's unanimous. Okay, item 12, Treasury Management Annual Report. Councillor Tate to present.
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. 2016-17 was a challenging year for Treasury management, with a continuing need to maintain and exceed the forecast returns in a changing landscape of investment strategy. And £3 million plus in interest earnings from investment and cash balances remain a seriously important source of income to this council. The net result of our activities was a favourable variance of £129,000, largely due to the move to diversified credit funds, which performed higher than expected with a return of 2.72% and an unrealised gain of a further 0.5 million, bringing the total return potential to 6.2%. Our overall return on Treasury management being 1.83% against the 1.82% forecast. So, whilst drawing attention to a strong result, we must also be careful to recognise that the council investments remain, as you'll see from Appendix 4, highly regarded for both security and returns, placing us at the peak of the benchmarked authorities that are viewed. And I'd like again to commend the financial and treasury management teams for achieving these goals. However, the future will continue to be difficult, and I'm sure we can rely on them to continue to reach these levels of performance in the future, and therefore I ask Council to note this report.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Gardner to second. Do you want to speak now, or reserve your right?
I'll speak now. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr Mayor, for asking me to attend the Basingstoke roll on your behalf. I was very happy to be asked and delighted to attend. Thank you very much. However, my congratulations on the achievement of a positive variance on our income this year after years of negative variances. One factor has been that Audit and Accounts recommended that the officers stop using optimistic assumptions about the inevitable but delayed increase in interest rates, which had led inevitably to negative variances. The decision to use diversified credit funds has proved to be right. The returns have been maintained in an environment of falling rates as long-term investments have matured. Also, we now have an unrealised gain on our investments of £500,000. Although this is unrealised and has not yet fallen into usable reserves, sometime hopefully it will, and this will give further advantages to our residents. I welcome the increase in the investment to 40 million. I did suggest this last year. The Treasury management system has been successful, and our officers are to be commended on the results that they've achieved.
Okay, Councillor Phillimore indicated he'd like to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've heard from two portfolio holders already telling us how difficult and challenging times we have. Bit of a surprise, really. They've been in power for 7 years in central government, and they promised us strong and stable government. But let's address the Treasury Management Report. It's a bit like Groundhog Day here. again, commenting on this report. Why? Because it's the same old approach, same old result, a fairly poor return on our residents' money. The 129,000 increase in interest received equates to 0.07 of our total balance. Hardly anything worth shouting about, and we employed consultants to assist us to achieve that result. It's equally disappointing to see that we're still lending to other councils at a very low rate of return. Let's hope they're doing something more imaginative, socially rewarding than we do with ours. We will never tire of saying we need a change in direction in the way we invest our residents' money. It's only political dogma, ideology from members opposite that is stopping this change of direction and creating a better society for all those in our borough. We've said it before, we'll say it again. We would get a better return economically and socially by building our own houses for our own residents. The housing policy we have is actually prejudice strung together as policy with a real danger of social cleansing. We can't let the spivs and speculators determine our housing policy. We need to include all members of society. We are crying out for homes that are accessible to those that can't afford to rent privately, let alone buy. Words don't keep you warm, safe, secure homes do. I suggest a change in direction for the many, not the few.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that the report, or I see that the report is for noting, and that's fine, but when it says this is for noting, I always think the devil's in the detail with those. So I've gone into the detail. It's all provided for everybody here in the chamber, and of course it's there for residents at home as well. But the residents might not feel like digging into financial reports. So I'd like to help them out. We often hear that there's not enough money to do anything within our town, that budgets are tight, and that's fine, we accept that. And we accept that we have to invest. Of course we do. However, what's interesting is how we invest, and indeed the return on that investment. Now, as Councillor Finnemore has just alluded to, a lot of money, a lot of our residents' council taxpayers' money is loaned out to authorities up and down the country. And I think they'd be quite interested to hear how much we loan out. So in the last year, we gave Plymouth £5 million for a return of investment of £15,000. We loaned Leeds £5 million for £20,000 back in return. North Ayrshire, £5 million for £18,500. Telford, £5 million again. Barnsley, Salford, they were the unlucky ones with £2.5 million. And of course, not to forget, our Liberal friends Eastleigh were also given Basingstoke council taxpayers' money, of which, yes, we got our £5 million back, but a return of investment of £21,500. £30 million worth of residents' council taxpayers' money was loaned to other residents across the country for a return of £117,500. That's a total investment of 0.39%. Mr. Mayor, I think we would get a far stronger return if we actually built some houses. I think we get a far stronger return if we actually improved our infrastructure within our town. I think we get a far better return, not on a financial basis, but on a social basis, if we invested it in improving the lives for our residents in this borough. It's our borough's money. It's our residents' money. It's not the money of those people in Telford, in Plymouth, in North Ayrshire. As good as those people may be, our residents want their money spent in our town. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Keith Watts, it's your turn. You remain seated if you like.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mayor, could I ask if Councillor Gardner could confirm that at the Audit Accounts Committee, when this was considered, we received assurances from officers that the bodies other than local government in which we invest have provided evidence of their compliance with ethical standards, and given that that's true, would the portfolio holder please arrange for that
fact to be shown item by item in future Treasury management reports?
Councillor Rattican, you can speak now.
Thank you. Can I just say to Councillor Cousins' point, if he looks at the Appendix 2, he will note that all of those investments in local authority deposits have all now matured, by the one in Salford, and that matures later this week. We have to look after our residents' money, and before we decide where we spend it and utilise it more properly, it's got to go somewhere, and it seems reasonable that we look after the money genuinely. And if it goes out to Labour councils or Liberal councils, I'm not against that.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at page 171, Housing and Regeneration Portfolio, and I want to talk to you briefly about the homeless situation. I don't see anything in the budget, but it may be there somewhere about investing for homeless people. And I do want to make this point to you, that your business colleagues at the top of town keep complaining about the homeless interrupting their day, frightening away their clients. And yes, it's true, they are there, because it's probably the only place in town where they can be. We haven't invested. We bought a property called Adelphi House. That's ours. We swapped it with the Paddock Road surgery, I think it was, from Sovereign. That property is now ours. It's been ours for a number of months, and nothing has been done to move it into a place for the homeless. We constantly get, and I constantly get emails from all sorts of people at the top of town who say, we don't want them there. They destroy our business. Well, we've got May Place with I don't know how many beds that could be moved to Adelphi House. And we've got the homeless themselves where a better service than twice a week could be provided. And yet, this document doesn't give us any hope for those people who are becoming hopeless.
Is that report noted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to respond to a couple of the points that were raised. The Treasury Management Report, which is what I was introducing, I'm sure is a fairly dry and dusty report. But I would like to tell you that, for me, this is a Treasury management and fiscal strategy that is for the many and not the few, frankly, because it generates finances which allow us to provide grants to invest in the community, to undertake work within the LIF. It allows us to make the investments that other councils cannot make in their community. So I reject and frankly resent the idea that somebody was going to say, well, actually, it's for the few. Our budgeting is for the community, and it's successful because we're able to earn from our assets, and we earn very well from our assets. In terms of the local government bonds, local authority bonds, the return over time is 6.6%. Which is well in excess of what you would achieve in other marketplaces. So when you look at what we're doing, you're saying, are we making change? Yes, we are making change. We've moved the whole policy away from the investment in government bonds into diversified credit funds, into property-based tools. So overall, we are moving and changing because we need to achieve the amount of money that we would want to invest in our communities. And I find it really quite difficult when people try and make political capital out of something which is a very simple issue. How do we raise funds in a difficult time for our residents? What we are doing, and when you say, is it a good fund or not, when you look at Appendix 4, you will see that our funds are the best returning and the safest, and that's the good job that we're doing for our residents.
Okay, is that report noted? Yes, okay. Item 13, appointment of monitoring officer. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Okay. item 14, I will ask the Chief Executive to present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As members will be aware, the Local Government Boundary Commission for England is currently undertaking an electoral review of Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council. Members had the benefit of a presentation from the Commission on the 30th of March 2017, earlier this year. A decision that will affect the ultimate outcome of the review, but one which is purely for the Council to make, is the electoral cycle for borough elections. Whether to remain as currently, electing by thirds, or whether to move to all-out elections. The report details the Commission's presumption that a decision to remain electing by thirds will provide a presumption of 3-member wards. The report provides details in the appendix of other councils that have recently been subject to boundary reviews, and in particular recent experience of councils that elect by thirds. Limited resident engagement has taken place to date, and in the event that members wish to consider moving to all-out elections, it is recommended that further, wider and deeper consultation be undertaken. Since the report has been circulated, feedback has been received to the effect that seeking to arrange an extraordinary full council meeting in September, if required as set out in the report, would be inconvenient for some members. As a result of the feedback received, officers have confirmed in writing with the Commission that providing that all other information due at the end of September, as per the programme is provided to them, that they would be prepared to extend the decision, that they would receive the information from the Council in relation to the question of electoral cycle, in terms of whether to continue by thirds or to move all out, until the day after the next scheduled full council meeting on Thursday the 26th of October. Therefore, for the avoidance of doubt, the Commission have said, providing that we confirm that information to them by Friday the 27th of October, they can receive that information. That would allow, if necessary, members to further consider the matter at the next scheduled council meeting rather than the requirement for an extraordinary council meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I understand there's an amendment from a motion from Councillor Janet Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the motion that this council should move to all-out elections from the beginning of 2019.
Okay, and Councillor Michael Westbrook to second. Is there a seconder? Laura James, okay. Do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'd like to reserve my right. Thank you.
Moving to debate. Simon, Michael. Councillor Bound is the first hand I saw.
Yes, I just wanted to make an amendment, Mr. Mayor, which I believe you've got notice of.
Yeah, we need to discuss it. I can just hold it. I think I need to adjourn to take some advice. I will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes while I go to the chamber and get some advice.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding as we worship for the Mayor.
Please be seated. Right, Okay, sorry for delay, but on gaining legal advice, I believe the Simon Bound motion negates the current motion on the floor. Okay. I want to hear the debate on Councillor Janet Westbrook's motion, but before we do that, I would like to ask our legal representative to give advice on the consultation process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I would like to refer members to is paragraph 10.1 of the report regarding consultation for changes. Members need to be assured that the consultation that has taken place so far is adequate for the purposes of this matter. The Supreme Court has looked at what consultation should be and what should be involved in it. Effectively, the consultation needs to be adequate, giving the options available, giving the time for people to look at and comment back on the issues, and to look at the advantages and disadvantages of the various options. If the Council does not think that has happened, then there is a potential for a legal challenge to the decision. However, members must make that decision themselves.
Debate. The first person I noticed was Robert Golding.
Mr. Mayor, I don't quite understand the legal advice. Could we be told what is the officer's advice to us as our officer? Have we had sufficient consultation in his view? Yes or no? I mean, we need guidance.
Mr. Mayor, the advice is that when members are making a decision on this, they need to be satisfied in themselves that they have followed the appropriate rules regarding consultation, that the consultation that has taken place so far has been adequate. I can give advice on whether I consider it or not, but that is, I am not the person making the decision here. You as members will be making that decision. If you do not consider it is adequate, then it is open for challenge.
Mr. Mayor, for clarity's sake, if there was to be a legal challenge, we would be asked, what did our legal officer tell us? I'd like to know what our legal officer is telling us, because if he's saying it's inadequate, then I will be presumably supporting what he says. If he says it's adequate, I might consider that it is adequate.
Absolutely clear here. It is not the legal officer's role to give a judgment in this chamber. It is our role to give a judgment in this chamber. The legal officer has given advice. He has told us a view. It is not the right of officers to give a judgment on that. We quite accept the advice that's been given. It is for us then to bear that in mind in what we choose to do.
I'm going to ask the legal advice.
Mr. Mayor, all I refer to is the report at paragraph 10.1, which states that, in the officer's view, should the Council wish to explore changes to its electoral cycle, it would need to undertake further consultation.
I've got Councillor Robert Golding, now I've got Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I am very puzzled by this motion. I did listen very carefully, and I don't think the proposer explained in any way why she thinks it's such a good idea. I don't think it can be that the Labour Party thinks it would benefit our residents, because if they did, they would be happy for us to consult our residents and find out what they think. So I have to say, I must conclude that the Labour Party somehow think there's a party political advantage in this motion, but they haven't said what it is. I suppose maybe it's less embarrassing to fail to take control of the council every 4 years than it is to fail to take control of the council 3 years out of every 4, but they haven't said that. I did notice that the seconder has reserved her right to speak, and I really do hope she will tell us why the Labour Party think this is a good idea. But if they can't, I shall assume that this is party politics and I shall vote against. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bound.
Have we started a debate? Because there seems to be...
Yeah, I'm taking names. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give some context as to why I wanted to move my amendment, I am very focused on the significant savings that can be achieved for public monies by switching to all-out elections in the borough. I believe all of us have heard significant voter fatigue whilst on the doorstep and potential disengagement that happens with politics, including local politics, when there is a constant campaigning for elections. So investing in a relatively small amount of money and time now in fully investigating the views around a potentially significant saving and elected representatives listening to the views expressed is very important to my mind. We all know in decisions there are advantages and disadvantages in everything. I wonder whether our residents have had a full opportunity to consider all of those in the options that we are thinking about and discussing this evening. I, for one, want to hear broad, considered views arrived through proper consultation. I would hope all members in this chamber would have considered those views of residents to review and take note of before we would make a decision of this magnitude.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have undertaken consultation. We've had a front-page article on the Council's magazine delivered to 70,000 homes. We've conducted a face-to-face survey with a random 1,100 representatives. We've had discussions with parish and town councils. We've had ensured active members of our local communities have been discussing the issue widely across the town. That has been a significant consultation. But the point is this. This chamber heard from the Local Government Boundary Commission that the July meeting would be the meeting where we would make a decision on this, where we would be clear about the view of this authority and where we stand. And I think it's important that we listen very carefully, not just to our residents, but also to the democracy of what we all are here to stand for and about. And having elections every 4 years, we're not a parliamentary system. We're not the European Parliament. We're not national parliament. We are a council. And where councils have the greatest responsibility is to be as close as we possibly can do to our electorates. And by electing by thirds, the advantage we have is that those residents have the opportunity to express opinions on a regular basis in our borough and turf out councillors they have no confidence in and elect those that they do, and change administrations and have an effect on their local politics, not national politics. That's not what we're talking about. Not a 4-yearly cycle, not a fixed-term parliament. We're talking about this chamber operating in and out of a relationship consistently, effectively, with our residents, the engaging face of politics. We know politics has got a difficult rep at the moment. We know the concern that residents have about whether they are truly represented by the politicians they elect. And if we have any responsibility, it is to be that engaged representative. And by electing by thirds, by having that system, what we do is maintain that relationship year on year, and the voters in this borough get the chance to express their opinion year on year on key issues that they concern about in their wards that do not relate to the whole of our council, on issues that relate, yes, to the whole of our council, but on local issues that relate to the future of our borough. We're passionate about Basingstoke. We say on this side of the chamber that we believe in Basingstoke. And we believe that the connectivity that we have is everything. The democracy we have in that context is everything. So yes, we have actually consulted. We have engaged. But whether we choose to change is the actual point this evening. If we choose to change, if that is the wish of this chamber, then that then leads to a series of actions that will flow, that will then conduct consultation and will take this matter further in one way. If we do not change, if that is the verdict of this chamber, then that will lead to a different course of action on the Boundary Commission in the context of the decision we make. It is this chamber that is sovereign. It is this chamber that has been elected to make the decision. The Local Government Boundary Commission sat there and told us as much. They want us to come up with a decision in order to move the process forward. In that context, it is right that we make a decision. That is the purpose of the motion being put, that we are decisive and direct, and we are straight on this, and that we do decide what sort of democracy we want in Basingstoke. I personally do not want a council elected every 4 years. I genuinely do not believe in that, not as a council, because that changes everything. That creates complacency. It creates an environment where residents no longer have a say in the fallow years. That is dangerous. Just take a look at the letters that we've had recently from our county council leader. The arrogance that was inside that letter from somebody that really doesn't have to answer to the electorate for the next 4 years. That's wrong. That's not what we should be about in Basingstoke. And I respect that there will be different views on this across the chamber. Of course there will be. But my passionate view is that the connectivity to people is key. We've spoken to residents, and residents are clear that they value their local councillor being that person that they have a connection with. Now, politically, I think that is incredibly important and incredibly valuable. And we've heard the residents' voices. I don't want to throw that away. So, no, I don't agree with all-out elections in that sense, and I'm very clear where I stand on this issue, having listened to residents, having listened to interested parties, the parish, having listened to those that have a voice. I think very strongly on this. And we can make the decision this evening, and that is the choice that is in front of us. I'm very clear where I stand. I'm sure others in this chamber are clear where they stand on this. Let us move on with this and make a decision.
Okay. Before I move on, there was a number of hands went up, so I'm just going to read who I've got on the list. I've got Gavin James next, then Clive Saunders, Colin Regan, and then Mike Westbrook. Have I missed anyone? Miller. That's it. Thank you. It's Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the first thing to say is when this council talks about doing consultations, we've got to reflect on the fact that we're generally not very good at them. Certainly looking at the Resident Survey 2017, and the question we asked was very leading. And quite surprising, it came out with almost exactly the same answer as we came out with 2014 asking the same question. Sometimes consultations don't get much response. Sometimes residents get very switched off by some of the things we discuss. And so we have this thing called representative democracy where we get to the very, very boring stuff, people elect someone they trust to make decisions on their behalf to save them the boredom of doing it. This may be one of those situations because, as mentioned earlier, we delivered 85,000 copies of Basingstoke Today magazine, so that means it was accessible to 195,000 residents, mentioning what we were discussing tonight, giving people an opportunity to have a say. As of the 11th of July, as it says now, council papers, of the 195,000 possible residents to apply, we've got a total of 1 that actually has, which would indicate very strongly this is one of those very boring matters where the residents would rather we make a decision on their behalf. So I think we've done enough, we've given the opportunity for consultation, people haven't taken it, I see no point in delaying the decision. Obviously, the decision itself is an unfortunate one because you started, the Chief Executive started by saying it's for Council to decide what sort of electoral cycle we have. Obviously, that's absolutely wrong. It's not our choice at all. We're left with one option, which I think is an attack on democracy and an absolute disaster for the borough, and another option that's exactly the same. So hardly great. Clearly, we'd all probably rather have alternate yearly elections with 2-member wards so we can keep communities together, but that's not an option. So in terms of the actual major decision we're making, in terms of which way we go, I can't stand either. I find it very hard to support something that I think is appalling, and both options to me are appalling. I will listen to the debate and make a decision on that, and possibly abstain on the basis I don't like voting for something I don't agree with. It's a free vote from this group because I think it's up to each individual member to reflect what they feel their residents might want. But I think to further adjourn for consultation and delay the matter is a complete waste of time. I think we've got enough information from our residents. We know that 194,999 just aren't bloody interested. Thank you.
Councillor Clive Saunders.
Mr. Mayor, before I begin, can I just ask a question of you, sir? I have in front of me the paper for this evening's meeting, which clearly says that there was a recommendation to Council. And that is what we should be debating. And the first recommendation to Council, it says, in respect of existing electoral arrangements, we have to decide to indicate whether we are minded to move to all-out elections and begin immediate public and stakeholder consultation, or B, wish to take no action at this time. A straightforward either or, as on our order paper for this evening. Therefore, why can't we just have a simple vote where we put a tick for yes for one and a cross for no, or the other way around? That is in line with what we've been asked to do this evening. It's in black and white, it's what we've all seen, because some of us didn't see the motion that was coming tonight, because it didn't arrive until the afternoon when some of us were busy doing other things. This is something which is here, it's been circulated, it's been published on the internet and on all the other papers, so why aren't we debating that particular recommendation and making a decision upon it?
I note your comments, but the motion that was put to this chamber was Janet Westbrook's. As you know, it's the Chief Executive presented the paper, and there was actually no motion on the floor, so we needed to put something on the floor.
But, Mr. Mayor, can I beg to differ with you? Because there is a paper here with a recommendation to Council, the same as there are recommendations to Council which come from our committees that can be introduced by somebody, but they're not actually proposed by anybody, because there are recommendations that come through from Council. This is a recommendation from the Chief Executive to Council that we consider these aspects of it. We can have the debate on the motion, but we should then move on to debating the recommendation. You cannot just throw a recommendation that's on the agenda paper out the window.
I've ruled basically there was no motion on the floor, so we needed a motion. The next speaker is Colin Regan. Right, so you next like to speak.
Thank you. This is a very simple question. It's, do we want to have more elections or less elections? If you stay with voting in thirds, because we now have to have all 3 men wards, or 3 lady wards, or 3 person wards, it means an election every year in every ward. If you have all-out elections, you have 1 election every 4 years. And voting in wards where you have 3 men, I hear the points being made about being close to our residents. For some of us in the rural areas, actually we're going to get further away from our residents, because we're going to have to cover such enormous areas to get 3-member wards that we're inevitably going to be disconnected from those communities we're supposed to be serving. But presumably that's all right for the town. It's us who in the rural areas have to suffer accordingly. And what about the time that's lost through PERDA every year? And if you add that PERDA time plus the time running up to PERDA when no major decisions are made, we actually lose 1 year in 4 out of the time when this council is functioning properly. Is that value for money for our residents? What is abundantly clear, in fact, though, is that residents want less, not more elections. They voted in the questionnaires when they were asked 2 to 1 against having more elections. So have we got the arrogance to sit here in this chamber and say, we know what's best? We know better than what our residents actually want. In fact, we know so much better what they want, what they should have rather, than what they want, that we're not even prepared to go out and ask them. And of course, by taking a decision that you've taken, Mr. Mayor, that's what you're preventing us from doing, from actually going out and asking our residents, what do you feel about this, so that we at least have the value of that input in making our decision. Now that, I think, completely undermines the reputation, the standing of local government in this borough. I think it's an absolutely appalling situation to have got into. I think the fact that even a political party would try and manipulate the processes to make that happen is appalling. And I think if we actually proceed to do away with the opportunity for our residents to have their say, we have completely undermined our standing in the community, and that is an absolute disaster. So I would ask you once again to think about why we are not debating the recommendation as on the order paper for tonight.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll tell you what about consultation. I'll tell you what, if the general public out there could see what's happened here tonight, they would say, why don't you stop talking, get out there, build some houses we can afford, fix the roads, cut the grass and kill the weeds. That's what they want. That's true consultation. And the end of austerity and pay the nurses more money. That's what they want. However, democracy, the Tories trying to put a price on democracy. It's costing too much. People all over the world are struggling for democracy in the vote, and the reason they don't have it is not because of the cost. Well, the suffragettes refused to vote because it's going to cost too much? No, because they didn't want them to have the vote. That was why. So all I can see here is the Tories want an elective dictatorship, and that's a quote from Lord Aylsham, who's a Tory grandee. If some of you are long enough to remember him. But in terms of, in all my life, all my political life, the last 30-odd years I've been involved in politics, every year we fight an election, and it's great. It keeps you on your toes and in touch with the people, and it doesn't cost much. There's no price you can put on democracy. Every time I go down to the West Side Community Centre, people say, what about this, what about that? And in my brain, we've got an election to fight next year, and so it keeps you on your toes. It's called democracy, and long may it remain. And I can't go for 4-yearly elections because always the Tories are interested in an inbuilt majority, but they could be wrong. Look what happened to Theresa May. I mean, she shot herself in the foot, didn't she, eh? We're all Jeremy Corbyn supporters now. So, but anyway, so there is no price you can put on democracy. We do not want an elective dictatorship. We want election every year so it keeps us in touch with people and it keeps us on our toes. It's called accountability.
Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'll come up straight away and say that I'm in favour of all-out elections. And I think that I think it's right that the council, once every 4 years, should be re-elected. That means all of us up for election on the same date every 4 years. Nothing new about that. Talking about democracy, I mean, our Westminster parliamentary elections are carried out in that way, exactly the same thing. There are many district and borough councils who similarly have all-out elections. I mean, in the constituency, parliamentary constituency where I sit, North West Hampshire, Test Valley Borough Council has for many, many years had all-out elections, and it's been very successful. Now, there are a number of very sound reasons for changing our electoral cycle. Most obviously, there seems to be some disagreement, but I would say savings is certainly one thing. But of course, it is more than savings. I mean, the electoral process is a disruptive process. Holding elections, council officers are involved in taken away from their day-to-day tasks and doing other things. Schools, community centres, community halls, village halls are suddenly occupied as polling stations. Members of this council, who would otherwise be devoting their energies to serving our residents, spend time out campaigning. By adopting all-out elections, the electorate, our residents, have a clear opportunity, and I quote from the report that was in our agenda papers, they have the opportunity to influence the political composition and control of their council. They provide a degree of inherent stability. They give a clear mandate to representatives for a programme of policies, allowing time for these to be carried through. On the other hand, frequent elections tend to dilute the public interest and reduce turnout. I'm sure you will all remember Brenda from Bristol. Not another one, she said. Absolutely, not another one. Thank you very much. We have an invitation there. Sorry? Thank you. But the most compelling reason to change to all-out elections comes from our residents themselves. From the surveys that we have seen in tonight's papers, there is a clear message that they would prefer to go for all-out elections. There seems to be a desire, and we haven't made a proper consultation, but nonetheless the initial stab at it does suggest that the residents want fewer elections, not more. In this chamber, I'm sure we all believe in democracy. And democracy means listening to the people and recognising their wishes. Our residents have indicated from the, as I say, from the surveys carried out, that they would rather have elections just once every 4 years. We must respect this wish and we must go out and do a proper consultation, and this is what I stand for. I hope you'll support the, is that a motion or the recommendation? Recommendation in the papers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Michael Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I have to say I'm opposed to all-out elections. Personally, I welcome the engagement that our current election cycle gives and the opportunities that gives for residents to decide how their council is run. I appreciate some of the arguments supporting all-out elections, but I strongly believe the elections in thirds ensures councillors and councils don't become complacent. A case in point was that letter received from the leader of Hampshire County Council. If that's what we can expect from all-out elections, do we really want that level of complacency here in Basingstoke? There was also an argument that all-outs improve voter engagement and increase turnout. Having been involved in the recent county elections, I can say the turnout figures for all-outs, like the county elections, don't back that up when compared to recent borough turnouts in thirds. In thirds doesn't lock residents into small number of councillors for 4 years and keeps us all firmly on our toes to do the jobs that we were elected to do, and that is to represent our residents.
Councillor Keith Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been involved one way or another with local government elections for just short of 50 years. And most of that experience has been in councils like this one, where not only do you have election by thirds, but there's tremendous diversity in the wards to take account of the local circumstances. What's wrong with this consultation and what's wrong with the boundary committee's view is it doesn't explain to people that if you have election by thirds, then you're going to have 3-member wards, except in rare exceptional cases. And so therefore the reference to the attitude of county councillors, I mean my county councillor is currently interfering in my ward to a very negative effect. People have not had explained to them that they'll have more distant councillors if you have election by thirds. Now that's a rule the boundary committee have imposed. I totally dislike it. I wouldn't be taking this position otherwise. But because all-up elections are the only way that we're going to get diversity in the wards, so that in Basingstoke I would hope community of interest would affect things, but in the what we call here the rural areas, although I do come in from the district's largest town, can only continue if we go for all-up elections. So although I'm not happy with all-up elections, I think we need to explain to the people before we have a proper consultation that the proposition for election by thirds is for giant wards where Councillor Sanders will be in the same ward as me, for example. Of the last boundary review, East Woody was too big to have one councillor, but on that occasion the boundary committee amended their rules. The same thing applied to Tadley, and they didn't amend their rules in that case. So we have to assume these rules are going to apply. We could have giant wards, people will be a long way from where the councillors live. Hopefully their councillors will live in the same borough, but that's wasn't the case with my opponent 3 years ago. So I will be bound and to advocate to all of my electors and vote myself for all-up elections because that's the only way in which we're going to retain this diversity and character in the borough. But we haven't had that consultation yet. Are we going to have a proper consultation that sets out all the implications? I mean, these daft questions that are supposed to be giving the views of the people in here are invalid. I agree with a lot of what's been said by the Labour members, but the overriding fact for me is that we need this diversity of smaller wards, bigger wards, many parishes or single parishes, and I'm very attached to that.
Councillor Tristan Robinson next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Outside of this chamber, I think, as a general rule, would be hard-pressed to find many members of the public who cared a great deal about this. I think electoral fatigue has played a big part. We've had huge numbers of national and local elections in a very short timescale. But the way that we elect democratic representatives has wide-reaching implications for our residents. All-out elections give clear and decisive administrations and enable planning for the long term. We've already heard from Councillor Sanders around how we lose 1 year in every 4 just through PERDA, and that's a key issue because the council is constantly in election mode and this hampers effective decision making. With regards to cost, all-out election savings have been shown independently by the House of Commons Library as up to £435,000 revenue over a 4-year term. Even our own officers have estimated savings around £200,000 over a 4-year term. To Councillor Reagan's point about funding services, that amount of money is the same as we spend on the town centre programme. That is a significant amount of money that we were talking about saving that we can plough into services that we will be serving our residents with. Most importantly, it's what our residents want to see. The resident survey showed 20% of residents against a move to all-out elections, with the rest either being in favour or not sure. Key reasons cited were equal opportunities and a fairer system. Councillors also need more time to implement policies. By contrast, the biggest reason given to make sure that councillors are elected every 4 years was that it allows the removal of ineffective councillors. And this is to Councillor Harvey's point around turfing out ineffective councillors. This is a false argument. Each councillor is elected for 4 years. If Councillor Harvey is elected for 4 years in Norden, you can hardly kick out Councillor Mrs James the year later to get him back. Well, you could do, I suppose. I'm sure the officers who are writing the question weren't suggesting that all 3 councillors in Norden were ineffective. Members and the public... No, it was terrible. Members and the public could be excused for being slightly confused tonight. It's clear that the Labour Party have proposed something that they fundamentally disagree with. In the words of a famous person who lived in our borough, surprises are foolish things. It's no surprise that Labour come up with an idea and scrap it later. At least tonight they scrapped it immediately. I deeply regret that this has become political because it is about our residents. It's about asking what they want. I do think we need to go out and have a decisive consultation with our residents about what they want for our electoral system. I don't think this is about political games. I think this is doing the right thing for our residents, so we should go out to consultation.
Councillor Potter.
Well, I fear Councillor Tristan Robinson's probably spent too long in the company of Mr J. Wardina, really, in terms of his unjustified sarcasm. I'm a councillor in Popley East, Labour councillor, and I'm very proud to be a councillor there. I don't profess to know all that much about the role of rural councillors. I think it's a very different role to the one that I have and my colleague Labour councillors have in similar wards. What I am proud to say is that I think we try very hard for our connection with the electorate. And we do that in a number of ways, not least of all, I think, is the regular commitment to put ourselves up, and I know the point Councillor Robinson makes on this, but for regular re-election, and we have to prove ourselves continuously. in regard to the work that we do on behalf of that electorate. And I think that connection is all important. And the only system that operates that effectively is the thirds, and that's why I support the continuation of what we have at the present time. I think all of us, can describe this in different ways, and I guess for a member of the public, they probably think all of this is all about vested interest in terms of our own best interests as councillors. And there's an element of that, of course there is really, but in terms of what I believe is the best system in respect of local democracy, it is what we have now, and I do not want to see that changed. We obviously have a motion before us tonight which we can make a very clear decision on, and I hope that we'll move to that as quickly as possible so that we can make some progress on this. Councillor Gavin James makes the point, and I think he's absolutely right, that in terms of the consultation process that has been carried out thus far, you are not going to improve on that. But what we will find, I tell you from the electorate, is even when the system was to change, they would notice the difference. And I say this as well, really, in regard to the type of situation that can occur where you have a 4-year fixed term for a predominant majority party, whichever one that is, happens to be the Conservative Party here, it's something else somewhere else, you end up with self-perpetuating oligarchies. And that is not good for local democracy. And what we want to do is to make sure that all of us are in touch with our electorate on a day-to-day basis, that we feel connected because we know what our accountability is to them, we respect that, and we make sure that we operate on their behalf to the best of our interests all the time. So I say, obviously, continue with the present system in respect of thirds. That's what I should be voting for tonight.
Councillor Miller, please, next. No, don't want to speak. Thank you. Councillor Gary Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the thirds, as my councillor friend has already said, keeps councillors on the toes if we have to go out and fight for elections each year. We have to earn voters' trusts, and having all-out elections, I believe, we would come distant. So having elections each year, we have to make contact with the voters. Talks in the paper, £60,000 could be saved, so I don't know where this £200,000 came from. £15,000 a year as a small price for democracy, if you ask me. And it also says in this report on 7.2, 185k could be saved if it's combined with the police commissioners. Well, I would say let's abolish the police commissioners and let's give that money to the police. That would save the money. Talk about voter apathy. The police commissioners, the first time they come around, it was less than 10% voter turnout. We talk about voter apathy as well. The county council elections we just had, the voter apathy was quite pathetic, really. And the turnout for county councils is historically lower than it is for borough elections, because borough councillors go out all year round working. County councillors are remote, they're down in Winchester, and all they do is cut our services at the end of the day. And you talk to people on the doorsteps, well, not all of them, the majority of them, and you talk to them on the doorsteps and they say, county council, where are they? We could save some money there by abolishing the county council and giving more powers, to the borough. So when I hear the Tories saying that we're having another election, we've just had 2 unnecessary elections. We had one a few weeks ago, which didn't work out that too good for you, and we had an unnecessary referendum on the Europe, which had a record turnout. And the general election just had the highest turnout for 20 years. So people are engaged if we engage with people, if you have new, fresh ideas. So I think we should stop apologising for democracy, and we should continue with the thirds, because it's the way we keep in contact, good sounding of councillors, listen to the local residents. So I think, get
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the vote be put, bear in mind the delay we had earlier.
So, everybody in favour of the vote be put, would they please indicate now?
Yeah, Councillor Mrs Westbrook's motion.
We're voting whether to put the vote on Councillor Westbrook's motion. But there was only Ken. There was Ken and then the seconder and then...
There's only one more.
Well, there's three, technically.
Okay. Well, you could say there are three more speakers, but the question has been put, so you want to take the vote?
Yeah. Yeah, there are three more speakers, technically, so I'll put... Did you get the count then? All right. All those in favour of the vote be put, please indicate now.
And then the alternative question could be those that want the debate to continue.
Okay, all those people that want the debate to continue, will they please indicate?
So 27 in terms of the vote now be put, 19 to continue the debate. So that's the vote now be put. The only issue is whether you invite Mrs Westbrook to sum up.
No, you don't.
Okay, the vote be put. Okay.
Yeah, the result of that is 27 people said the vote be now put and 19 for against. So those all in favour for Janet Brooks' motion, would they please now indicate with a show of hands?
All out elections.
Yeah.
Can I be clear what you're going to put the motion to the floor? Is that what your intention is,
Yeah.
Mr Mayor? Can we be absolutely clear of the vote?
Yeah.
And can we have a recorded vote, please?
Recorded vote, okay. Right. So while they're setting it up, the motion is that this council should move to all-out elections beginning from 2019. We'll now put it to the vote, and it needs a two-thirds majority for it to go through. The vote's now open. Those in favour? Yeah. Cool couple of abstentions. Councillor Sherlock and Councillor Burgess, you haven't voted yet. Are you abstaining? Vote is now closed. just while they're sorting out, I'm proposing to suspend standing orders as we're coming up to 9:30. Is everyone agreed? No.
Do you want to deal with this first and then ask about something?
Okay. I'll just. The motion is lost. The council will continue to let by thirds. So by a show of hands, for the people that don't want to suspend standing orders. Christian Robertson,
can we just be absolutely clear? Can we have a positive motion, and can we all understand from the Mayor, and can we all know what we're voting for, please?
All those in favour of suspending standing orders so we can go past 9:30, please indicate now. Okay. People, members, people keep putting their arms up and down, so we're going to go to a recorded vote so that we can. Okay, what we're voting on is yes to continue the meeting and no to stop the meeting. Councillor Tilbury and Councillor Watts have not voted whether to continue the meeting. Oh. Okay, so we continue the meeting, but we can't go past 11 o'clock if I remember rightly. But hopefully we won't get that far. Okay. Item 15, potential support for Basingstoke-based multi-agency trust for Basingstoke schools, to be presented by Councillor Simon Bound.
Agreed.
Someone got their mic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I promised to keep it short, and it wasn't Nigel, everybody, it was Tony. Dear Mr. Mayor, this paper sets out very clearly how much Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council supports our local schools and how much we want everyone to do the same. A good education is a key contributing factor to improving life chances of our young people, and young people should be our focus when we look at how we support the development of our borough. Our schools have faced some significant challenges, well documented in this paper, and others that have been presented to this council. We are very supportive of the current schools improvement plan coordinated by Hampshire County Council and believe the creation of a Basingstoke-based multi-academy trust would progress this good work. Indeed, a Basingstoke MAT would enable this work to be taken to the next level when it comes to attracting and retaining good teachers, offering support across schools and closer collaboration. Parents also need to know that we as the Borough Council have confidence in our schools and the education that they can deliver for our students. I believe education in Basingstoke and Dean is on the cusp of something really exciting, something that we have all been waiting to see for many years. We need to play our part. We need to do everything that we can to ensure the borough's young people get the best possible education available, and they get it here in our borough.
Okay, I understand Councillor Tate is going to second that. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Any speakers? Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to welcome the paper and welcome the initiative to create the Multi-Academy Trust in Basingstoke. I'm not one for standing up and saying I support academies, because in principle I've always had a problem with them coming from a comprehensive school. But what I recognise is the need for a cooperative and collegiate approach to our education system in Basingstoke that sees our colleges and our schools work together, and more importantly than all of the conversations we may have amongst head teachers and governing bodies, it's the parents and the children, the young people who see the benefit of this multi-academy trust. So we need to be 100% behind it, giving it the support it requires to succeed, and we clearly see that in the paper presented. We need to see it work with our local education authority. We need to see Hampshire be fully engaged and part of this in a constructive and positive way so that it succeeds in our borough. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Hampshire alone cannot want the best for Basingstoke and Dean because it operates on Hampshire's level. Only Basingstoke and Dean can want the best for our residents because we are here representing our residents in our communities. So this is an amazing opportunity that we should seize. We want to see the local schools, both LEA and Academy, join the Multi-Academy Trust. There are those that are already part of other academies, but it would be very constructive if they were part of this together, so that all of our schools in Basingstoke were all pulling in the same direction. And key to this as well, and very importantly, it can help us with teacher recruitment and retention. It can help us with teacher training and the development of quality teaching in classrooms, which is incredibly important. It can help us with leadership in our schools, the cooperation between schools, and it can help us with accountability in having the governing bodies we all want to see in our schools, holding those organisations to account in a way that makes parents confident in education in Basingstoke. And that's the prize. We want parents to have absolute confidence in education in Basingstoke. And we have got Basingstoke and Dean's best interests at heart. And as I said before, it's why we on this side of the chamber believe in Basingstoke.
Thank you. Councillor Ratticum, please, next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to say, I was at scrutiny this week, and I can... Councillor Potter? Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt that. I was at scrutiny this week where we discussed education. We had a superb presentation by Jean Thorpe, the improvement manager for this area for Basingstoke and Dean. And my feeling when I came out of that meeting was that there is much more that unites us about education than divides us. And I think this is a wonderful recommendation to Council. It has my full support, and if there's anything I can do as a chair and former chair of schools to help this, I really would put my shoulder to the wheel to do that. And as a further point, I'd like to explore where the Basingstoke University could be at some point in the future, because we have to give ambition to our children so as they stay and continue to be educated here, not just have their primary education here, but don't leak to Winchester and to Hart for their secondary education. So it's a wonderful piece of work, and I fully support it. Thank you.
No other speakers. Did Councillor Tate like to use his reserved his right? No.
Thank you, Mayor. I start from the outset by saying I've always been utterly opposed to the academy idea. I'm not sure which government started it, but they were idiots. So far, for Basingstoke and Dean, it's resulted in epic failure. And in fact, nationally, there's no evidence to suggest academies do any better than local authority schools. Obviously, despite that complete failure, the Conservatives are now very keen to expand academies for some reasons I've never worked out. However, we are stuck with national policy. We can't change it, and if you're going to have academies, the best way to do them is probably via the route that we're exploring here. Local schools working together, but particularly as we've got quite a few small schools, working together, sharing resources, is probably the best way to deliver education at a broad curriculum across the borough. So as much as I oppose academies, if you're going to do it, this is the way to do it, and so I support the paper.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot you there. Councillor Tate, do you want to use your second?
Mr Mayor, all the good things have been said. I won't repeat them.
Councillor Simon Bound, would you like to sum up? Thank you for making it quicker. All those in favour, please indicate by raising their hands. Agreed. I think that's unanimous. Okay. Item 16, calendar of meetings. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to go back to point number 14. I'm very confused. We had the order paper, okay, which then there was an amendment moved, which was then defeated. So therefore, don't we go back and have a look and vote on the order paper?
No, there wasn't. Okay.
Mr Mayor, can I ask a point of order? Because you said that the motion that was debated was a different motion to the one on the order paper.
There wasn't a motion, was what I was...
No, if it's a different motion, why can't we debate a different motion?
We're already on 2 items afterwards, so it's a bit late to bring up.
I think all you can say is you ruled on that.
Yeah. Okay. Calendar of meetings. There's an updated appendix attached, and you'll notice that the development control... Pardon? I've already ruled, and we're already took... I've made a ruling. Can you please sit down? Because we've already 2 items on. Calendar of meetings. The DC meeting will be moved by 1 week and take place on the 23rd. And I understand Councillor Simon Bound wants to make another amendment to the calendar.
Yes, as per the order paper, it's just about moving full council in October, just 1 week ahead of itself, so it avoids school half term, which I know is an issue for several members in this chamber.
That's not this year, this is next year for 2018, so yep, we'll amend that. Councillor Cousins first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the spirit of school holidays, there are several in July 2018 which actually fall during the school summer holidays. I think most members of staff and councillors as well would rather spend that time with their children or their grandchildren or with their families. Could I ask that that be reviewed, please?
Okay, we'll have to bring it.
You want to ask if that's seconded, and then we can bring it back.
Is that seconded, and we can review that and then bring it back? Sean. Okay, we're on to number 17. Notice of motions, Grenfell tragedy. Pardon?
Is he still on?
Sorry, I'm still on 16. Councillor Potter, and somebody else indicated.
Mr Mayor, sorry. And, I mean, firstly, could I apologise to Councillor Rattigan for my interruption on the last item? Unforgivable, I'm sorry. In terms of calendar of meetings, could I ask that the scheduling of the Development Control Committee in August 2018 be looked at? I know I have the chair here this evening, there's tremendous pressure in regard to the applications that are considered, and there's always pressures in terms of determination dates, but I see absolutely no reason why the wit of woman or man couldn't come into play here and we could have an extra meeting somewhere else rather than it being scheduled for August. It's a difficult month, not just for members, by the way, but for members of the public who have to attend DC committee and those applicants and respondents. It just isn't a good month for a DC committee, and I would like that looked at again, Mr Mayor.
Okay, There was somebody else indicated down this side. Councillor Tony Jones.
Just all I was about to say is in future, we're talking 2018, but it should be either in our standing orders to try to avoid when children are off school. Mine are grown up, so it doesn't make any difference. But if we're looking for diversity in this chamber, we want more women councillors and single men who's got children. We should be aware of that and make sure we're doing that before we come to council. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take it back and review it, and it'll come back to the next full council.
Sorry, very quickly. I think probably we're only talking about the last 2 weeks in July, not the first two, so that shouldn't be beyond the wit of man. Or the Chief Executive.
Councillor Handon-Gold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask you for some clarity, please, because I'm very confused as to why you're now accepting motions from the floor that are not in writing, but you wouldn't receive one from us earlier.
They're comments on the calendar, and we're taking it back to look at it. Anybody else on the calendar? No. Okay, item 17. Notice of motions, Greenfield tragedy. Councillor Tristan Robinson to present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, no, my own father's interrupted me.
I'm going to get this for the rest of the night.
Could Councillor Tristan Robinson be allowed to present his motion from a sitting position so that those people watching on the webcam can actually see his can see his face rather than his nether regions, which they were treated to last time?
I have instructed Mel to take that back to make sure it doesn't happen next time. But yes, please remain seated so we can see your face while you're presenting the motion.
It's not often I've been able to silence him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure members... I won't stand up. Oh, dear. I'm sure members on all sides will have been shocked and saddened by the terrible tragedy at Grenfell Tower last month. The terrible tragedy began with a fire on the 4th floor and spread rapidly to the floors above due to the combustible cladding, which was a key issue in this tragedy. After the event, the Department for Communities and Local Government issued guidance which asked councils to ensure that private and public sector landlords with buildings over 6 stories test the cladding and undertook fire safety checks. To this end, I would like to thank our council officers and Hampshire Fire and Rescue for ensuring that all buildings of that size in the borough were got round speedily and efficiently to give reassurance to our residents. The issue that we have faced as a council is the inability to compel landlords to undertake the tests. This meant that at the time of writing the motion, some landlords had not fully complied. This will become even more of an issue as the guidance cascades down to properties under 6 stories, which is likely to include a wider range of landlords. To this end, the purpose of the motion is to ask government to give local authorities the power to mandate testing. I would like to thank Councillor Harvey and Councillor Westbrook for their amendment, which is printed in the updates pack, and it was agreed in advance with myself and Councillor Golding as the seconder of the motion. We agree that it's also vitally important to raise the issue of building regulations, permitted development, and inspection powers which can affect the safety of our residents, particularly with regards to fire safety. As a council, we are obligated to protect and reassure our residents wherever possible, and I hope that all members will support this motion tonight.
Councillor Hannah Golding to second.
Can I reserve my right to speak, please?
Gavin James.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a unanimous agreement, but as someone who, within his ward, has obviously two tower blocks that actually have more residents in Glenville, obviously the matter is very serious. And it was most concerning when we heard of the tragedy that when residents contacted me, I couldn't give an answer within 48 hours, which is kind of what I expected because of the problems. It's clearly not good enough, and anything that speeds up that process to make sure that they're safe and that we have straight answers for them has to be supported. So I should definitely be supporting the motion as amended tonight.
Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in standing up, I move the amendment, and I thank the mover of the motion in accepting the wording and helping us with the wording in the context that's before us. The motion and the way it was written, in the intent, and then the amendment add to something that I think we are all passionate and care about, in the sense we need to take action, and that action needs to be positive in response to an absolute tragedy. I don't know, yeah, you saw the video, you saw the television cameras, and you saw Grenfell Tower, and, you know, anybody, the reaction just to see what happened, the tragedy, the crisis, the disaster, and everything that flows from that, all around this chamber. I'm sure we all share our concern, and also, in a sense, want to do the right thing, to put anything right we can in the context of the system that very clearly failed those residents. Now, there will be answers and questions asked of government, of councils, of the authorities, of all those in local government, all those in national government, and all those beyond, where the responsibilities do lie in regard to Grenfell. But we also have a responsibility directly to our residents here in Basingstoke and Deane. And the motion talks about inspection and about the importance of that, which is key. The amendment then adds to that, and the debate we had at EPH, the conversations we've had. Building regulation plays a critical part. Fire regulation plays a critical part. The regulatory framework in which we operate, in which private and public operate, is key here. And we must see that effective, work, and deliver the confidence and the security and the surety that residents deserve. In terms of permitted development legislation, we may debate the merits on it, we may debate where we stand on it, but the point is this: at the moment, the legislation lacks when it comes to the fire, safety and building regulation elements that must be put right, because we cannot allow office block conversions that do not have the appropriate protection building regulations, or in the context in which we're debating this, our residents and the residents that would live in them have the confidence and assurity they deserve. The same with the inspection regime and also the procurement process. This is an important part of the amendment, and it's an important part of the manner of the investigation that is now taking place with regard to Grenfell. How we procure, how we go about the services, and the application of our rules and regulations is key here. And we must look at that positively, such that safety, and it is exactly as it is worded, that scrutiny where it is required fulfills its agenda, and that safety and security, again, is given proper balance and proper understanding, but that residents are not put in any jeopardy because of any decisions that may be made. And we need to give reassurance to residents, I also believe strongly, that both public and private sector, that the rights they have about high standards of safety are assured, that the voices they have are listened to. And this is not a political point, and please do not take it as such. But the residents of Grenfell, and one of their strongest comments was that they were not listened to by the authorities. They were not listened to by their local council. They were not listened to. We have got to put that element right in the context of our housing in this country. And we can play our part positively and constructively with a proper examination of tenants' rights in the way that high standards of safety and fire regulation are assured. And I'm sure we all share that desire and aim to do that properly and effectively. And the amendment is put in that spirit, and I am grateful for the mover of the motion to accept the wording and working with us on the motion, as well as other colleagues on the other side of the chamber. And hopefully we can see some action from this from government that we can all have confidence in.
Councillor Mike Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Having attended our council's recent fire briefing following the tragic events in Grenfell, and having listened to the debate of the EPH committee last week, it is clear we're all shocked by those events, and we have a responsibility to make every effort to see that doesn't happen again. In our role as councillors, we have a duty to raise the concerns that we've highlighted in our amendment. Councillor Robinson's motion is admirable, and I fully support that. Our amendment simply seeks to strengthen this council and the leader's argument when writing to the Secretary of State. Thank you.
I haven't got any more speakers. Oh, all right, sorry, Councillor Ravel. All right.
Mr Mayor, as Cabinet Member responsible for planning regulation, I think it's only right I address the meeting a little bit about what has happened and a little bit about the future and the wording that perhaps we're encouraging the leader to send to the government. Since the tragic fire, we as a council have been working with local housing providers and landlords and with Hampshire Fire and Rescue to see what support and reassurance we can give them and to ensure that compliance with the urgent action that needed to be taken to reassure residents about the materials that may have been applied to the outside of their tower blocks. Of course, as we know, we don't have our own housing stock, but that doesn't absolve us of the responsibility that we have to our residents. We have actively pursued both private landlords and those with other landlords as well. As far as private landlords are concerned, I can say that the council's position is that all have responded appropriately, and as well all other landlords have too, the social landlords. So the result of all of that is we have, I am able to say that there are no aluminium-clad buildings in the borough that require testing. But as a result of engagement with members, it came to the officer's attention, as you'd expect in such engagement, well, what about other types of cladding? How does that feature? And officers are writing to the government to say, look, what do you want us to do about this? How do we enforce it? Where do we take it further? Because it's clear that this is just an unknown, and that in itself is something that will concern residents. The regulatory work that needs to be undertaken, I have to say, is immense. Those of you who understand how regulators work, they need to be independent, they need to have thorough scrutiny, they need to be open to the public so that the public can be reassured that they are competent and regulate, in this case, building control. And the incident at Grenfell Tower illustrates that our planning system, with its building control function, has not been protecting the public. There have been materials used and methods of application adopted which have failed to protect residents. And the whole incident has shone a spotlight on the building control regime. In my view, there can be no doubt that the government needs to undertake a thorough review of building control, to include the licensing of building inspectors and to give oversight to their work to the local planning authorities. There needs to be a thorough review of the materials that have been used perhaps in the last 20 years and the methods of their application. This review, of course, will take time, but the process has to be started soon, and I'd urge the leader to urge the government to take urgent action upon it. Of course, developers who have clad buildings, as an example, some time back have to be held to account, and replacement materials have to be applied. And although that will be something that will not be welcomed by those affected, it has to be done. And the government has to give powers either to local planning authority to enforce that, or alternatively take direction and action itself. So these are tough measures, but ultimately any regulator in dealing with all the different aspects in life that we think about: food safety, health and safety, Environment Agency and other regulators that we're all familiar with. Their prime interest is the protection of the public and public safety. And with that in mind, what we are doing tonight is resonating, as I think we should. And I think that probably, as members, we feel that we share a little bit of this responsibility through our function in this council, through our involvement with those that we represent, to engage with the government and say, look, well, we've got the proof it hasn't worked, but we don't know the extent of how it's not working. And it's up to us to say, to challenge central government, to say, look, you've got the power to make it work, and we're the ones who will enforce it for you. So we have to go to them, and I urge the leader to put these thoughts and the others that the leader will hear tonight into a letter, to share that letter with us, and see what response that he gets from central government. Because I think we're best placed to regulate and act as that independent regulator with our objective officers, and we're close, as it were, obviously to our residents.
That's time.
But
Can
if we're
you
not
wind
given
up,
that,
please?
if we're not given that power, I think residents will be failed in the future.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Hannah Golding, would you like to use your seconders?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking the officers, fire service and private and social landlords who have been working so hard to reassure residents about the safety of their buildings since the tragedy at Grenfell. It's reassuring to know how quickly and efficiently that this has taken place, and also that no major issues were identified. None of the cladding used in Grenfell was identified in any building over 6 stories in the area, and that fire safety systems are working and fire risk assessments are in place. However, we do have to acknowledge that the bulk of this work has been done on goodwill, with private and social landlords choosing to work with the Borough Council. We can make recommendations, but we can't directly inspect or compel providers to follow DCLG requests. And this means that we could be in a position where we can't reassure every single resident that lives in a tower block within Basingstoke and Dean. And for me, that is not acceptable. I believe it is right for this council to work with central government to make sure that local authorities have the ability to facilitate an effective response for all residents, regardless of their landlord or leaseholder. The key points of our concerns have already been agreed and discussed in a cross-party way and are clearly documented in the amendments. I therefore will not speak further, but would urge members to support this motion so that we, as a council, can have appropriate authority to assure the safety of our residents in the borough. Thank you.
Councillor Tristan Robinson to sum up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank all speakers tonight for their contributions. I think they've been incredibly valuable and constructive. I think this is clearly an issue that members care very passionately about, and rightly so. We want to ensure that all residents in the borough feel safe and secure, no matter what sort of accommodation they find themselves in. I think there will be questions that are asked at the public inquiry of Grenfell, and I do think that those will be taken into account by government. I think many members were surprised at the meeting that we had with the Fire and Rescue Service to hear that fire safety is not actually a planning consideration. And therefore Planning Permission and the Development Control Committee cannot make a determination on fire safety grounds. It is a matter for building regulations, which is fine, and it is being examined in that way, but I do think that that raises some alarm bells. This is also an issue with regards to permitted development, as the amendment says. Whatever the rights or wrongs of permitted development, it is wrong that we have differential fire safety standards for office blocks and residential accommodation, and one can be converted to the other without being sufficiently upgraded. I'd like to thank Councillor Offell for his comments as portfolio holder, and I do think that there's a huge challenge ahead of central government with regards to this, but it's an issue that we must not shy away from. We absolutely need to do our utmost to ensure that the regulations are put in place in the right way, to ensure for the protection of our residents, and our motion seeks to start to do that. Thank you.
Is that all agreed? Thank you. Item 18, notice of motions improving housing standards. Councillor Ashfield to move.
Thank you. The last census showed a marked decrease in home ownership and an increase in households in the borough living in rented accommodation. A growing percentage of households living in private rented accommodation stood at 12% in 2011, which represented a 71% increase over the 10-year census period. This proportion has no doubt continued to grow in the intervening years. The DCLG Housing Survey of 2012-13 reported that for the first time in post-war history, more people rent from a private landlord than from the council or a housing association. A YouGov survey in 2014 suggested that 50% of growth in this sector in the last 2 years has come from families with children, who now make up nearly a third of private renting households. Almost half of renters are aged 35 and over, and nearly a third of renters expect to be renting for the rest of their lives. Buying to let has become commonplace, with private investors seizing the opportunity posed from high-cost home ownership and a lack of affordable housing. That said, the majority of landlords take their responsibilities very seriously. I have had the good fortune to rent myself from a reputable landlord via a credible letting agent. The property is regularly inspected and safety checked. It has not only been maintained well, but also improved. My deposit is held legally, and rental increases have been modest and fair. I do not suggest that my experience is rare, but there are certainly rogue operators. Some of these let-it-and-forget-it landlords are acting deliberately, owning large portfolios. Others perhaps have become accidental landlords of 1 or 2 properties without the experience to handle the demands of their investment. Either way, we have residents within the borough who are living in poor and often unhealthy conditions with inadequate support to challenge their landlord. Tenants are vulnerable to eviction through no fault of their own. A recent report by Shelter put Basingstoke and Deane in the top third of local authorities whose residents are most likely to be evicted. This makes tenants far less likely to complain to their landlord or to report their landlord to the council's housing standards for fear of eviction. I have recently met a resident in my own ward in this very situation. The family home is in a state of disrepair, but with an informal arrangement and a lack of alternatives in the vicinity, the family are afraid to rock the boat. This is a family who, if threatened with eviction, would most certainly become a priority on our housing list. It's therefore prudent that we continue to monitor the private rental sector and protect residents. Conditions in the private rented sector are worse than in any other form of tenure. 33% of private rented homes fail to meet the government's decent homes standard, compared to 20% of owner-occupied homes and 15% of social rented homes. Almost 1 in 5 privately rented homes contains a Category 1 hazard. Research carried out by YouGov and Shelter showed that 61% of tenants have experienced mould or damp, leaking roofs or windows, electrical hazards, animal infestations or a gas leak in the last 12 months. 10% of tenants report that their health has been affected in the last year because their landlord has not dealt with repairs and poor conditions in their property, and 9% of private renting parents said their children's health has been affected. This council relies on privately owned properties to ensure housing demand is met. Housing officers are encouraging residents to make private rental arrangements in order to keep the housing list down and to reduce homelessness. This is all very well, but with the number of people living in the private rented sector growing and set to increase further, improving housing standards must be a key priority for the council. Basingstoke and Deane has the power to implement a landlord accreditation scheme. This would enable us to manage the private rented market, tackle poor conditions and drive up professionalism. It would also allow us to provide landlords with information and training and to give a growing proportion of our residents peace of mind and the support to make the right choice from the outset. A report from 2016 suggested that 300,000 landlords in the UK are failing to hold tenant deposits legally, representing £500 million of deposits. Whilst the figures for Basingstoke aren't known, it's estimated that 1 in 6 landlords are guilty of this practice. It is tenants of these unscrupulous landlords who are least likely to complain for fear of eviction. We must do all we can to clamp down on this activity, and this motion seeks to support tenants in challenging the illegal holding of rent deposits by landlords. As housing becomes more scarce, HMOs are set to increase. These rentals are particularly attractive to young, single occupants who do not have the means to buy or rent one-bedroom property themselves. For landlords, these properties offer a high yield and a strong market demand. This council only requires HMOs of more than 2 stories to be licensed at the moment, of which there are 29 such properties. We estimate a further 100 2-storey HMOs are running in the borough without the requirement for a licence. This motion supports reintroduction of performance target of 100% annual inspection of licensed HMOs and monitoring assessments of non-licensed HMOs. Finally, acknowledging that as a local authority, we do not have the power to face the challenges from such a strong private rental market alone.
I can finish up quickly, please.
Okay. I urge all members to support this motion, which would provide a win-win-win for the council, for the majority of reputable landlords, and for a significant and growing proportion of our residents.
Councillor Regan to second. Do you want to reserve your right to speak now? Reserve the right. Okay. Councillor Laura James is the first person I've got on the list.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The tragedy of Grenfell Towers has placed the management of housing and the safety of housing clearly in all our minds. We have seen how the lack of regulation and the lack of oversight can lead to tragedy. This council did have a housing strategy that measured its success by setting a priority that we would achieve 100% annual inspections of licensed HMOs and monitoring assessments of non-licensed HMOs. This target has disappeared. The management of houses in multiple occupation are governed by regulation approved in 2006 and implemented under Section 234 of the Housing Act 2004. This regulation was designed to ensure that all parts of houses of multiple occupation is in good repair, that they are have adequate facilities including fire alarms and fire safety equipment which is properly maintained and properly checked, and that all means of escape from fire are kept free from obstruction. This regulation relates to all HMOs as defined under the Act. Essentially, this means that any house containing 2 people who share common facilities, such as a kitchen or bathroom, and do not form a family or a household as defined by the Act. In light of Grenfell, why would we not want to ensure this standard in every HMO in our borough? This council had a Basingstoke-Dean landlord good practice guide, and Councillor Golding, who's not here now, may remember it. Again, this document has disappeared. Where's it gone? If we look at our private sector housing renewal policy voted through in 2006, it says that our private rented sector in Basingstoke has increased by over 70% in the last 10 years. That people buying their own homes has dropped by nearly 19%. The trend in private rented accommodation is up sharply, and Shelter says this is mirrored nationally. Shelter says that 61% of local authorities are promoting local accreditation schemes and demonstrate the positive benefits and success of local schemes. Their best practice shows what can be achieved by these schemes and how landlords, the council and most important tenants all benefit from a focus on standards. Our private sector housing renewal policy is lacking in any substance. A borough accreditation scheme is a practical way to improve the quality of the private accommodation. We want housing standards to be better, and because of Grenfell, we have a duty to ensure that they are, and our current policies are lacking completely. I urge you please to look at the private sector housing renewal policy, and I think you'll be dismayed. This motion is about the improvements we must make to our council, working with our borough landlords in partnership and together. Please support the motion.
Councillor Terry Reid, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Cabinet Member responsible, can I say I'm very happy for this to go to EPH for a further piece of work. I think it's important that members have the chance to discuss it. Chair of EPH, I believe, is happy to take it. So, in the interest of finishing business on time tonight, I'd like to suggest that the vote be put now, Mr Mayor.
Is everyone in agreement that the vote will now be put? Agreed. Okay. Everyone in favour of the motion? Agreed. Unanimous. Thank you. Item 19, notes and motions. Commitment to affordable house on Mannydown. Paul Harvey to present.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have debated in this chamber affordable housing on Mannydown on many an occasion. We've sat round committee room and we've debated affordable housing on Mannydown on many occasions. Many things have been said, many things have been argued. But what we are clear on and what we should be clear on, absolutely, because that was where, when the High Court ruled that the purpose for which the land was bought, that it should be developed, and a cross-party conversation began about the development of Mannydown, we agreed that our council policy and the direction of travel should be that 40% affordable housing on Mannydown was a key and essential part. The issue we have now is that we face uncertainty, that conversation and actions of others and the way that the debate has now gone is such that we are not confirmed as the landowner, the actual owner, that which is promoting the land for development, of delivering 40% affordable housing. I sat in this chamber and listened to others tell us that you ain't going to see more than 5 to 15% if you're lucky. I sat in debates about 40% saying we're going to achieve it, we're going to aim for it, we're going to try for it. Well, I remember that the money used to buy Mannydown was from the sale of council houses, that the money used came from social housing with a commitment. Councillor Tilbury's got the document. I remember I should have asked to borrow it from you actually in tonight, because it's there in black and white, where a certain commitment is given that those proceeds and the use of that money would be for the reprovision of affordable housing. In that context then, that meant socially rented. We still mean that to a greater extent today, because look at the needs analysis of our borough. But what we want from us as landowners, this council, is an absolute, unequivocal commitment to 40%. And why would we not want that? Because that is our policy. And conversations have been going on about, oh, we might have to reset the procurement process. We might have to think twice about what we do with our partners. Well, the question begs, if that's the case, why in the world were we negotiating with our partners when it wasn't clear that 40% was our policy and absolutely our policy? Why would we as a council not be doing that? That raises a whole range of questions and scrutiny that will now need to be undertaken in the context of where we now sit. But what this council can do, confidently, absolutely confidently, is say we are committed, absolutely, to 40% affordable housing on Mannydown and the delivery of homes that are within reach of our residents. That is what the 40% matters, and that is what we should do. And in moving this motion, Mr Mayor, in having this on this agenda this evening, it isn't about Groundhog Day and here we go again and haven't we said it? We've said it all. Why you keep pushing this? We keep pushing this because we are not yet absolutely confident that we're going to get 40% on Mannydown. And we will keep on pushing this and pushing it as hard as we possibly can at every opportunity we have, because it is that important to our borough. This is the largest development going on in Basingstoke. This is directly involving public authorities. We call this, interestingly, a garden village. We have gone to the Department for Culture and Local Government and said, we are developing a garden village in Basingstoke. One of the most fundamental principles attached to a garden village is the development of sustainable, local, affordable housing. It is written into the town and country planning associations and the DCLG's understanding of what a garden village is. So let's call apples apples and pears pears and say if we're going to claim it to be this, we want the standard to be this. If we're going to go out there and promote it as this, then we should honour that fully and without reservation. And the partners that we choose to bring on and get involved with should also be that. And if they are not, then the question asks, well, who's been doing the negotiating and why isn't it the case? Because that does come as a question, it really, really does. So please pass this motion. There's no reason for you not to. Why would you not pass this motion? Why would you have any way, any doubt about confirming as landowner our commitment to 40% policy-compliant affordable housing on Manydown? Why would you seek to amend it and play games with it in that sense by taking out the absolute point about it being non-negotiable? Because as a council we can, and as a council we should. There is nothing wrong in that. There is no legal advice, no lawyer, no anybody that can say that actually as a council, directly involved as a landowner, we shouldn't be considering those words in that way, in an appropriate and judged fashion. And we do. And we have a High Court ruling to point us in the direction. So, Mr Mayor, thank you for allowing me to make the speech in favour of this, because as a Labour group, we feel very, very strongly on this.
Run out of time. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Keating to second.
I think this is the first time I've ever experienced a deputy mayor speaking in a motion like this. Let me just say, I've always been a supporter of Manydown, and I will continue to be a supporter of Manydown. But I was horrified by reports of a recent meeting where some people at that meeting suggested we might even get 5% affordable housing. So that triggered my interest in speaking on this particular motion. Let me just say, this council has had a standard response in terms of housing on Manydown, and it has always included our commitment to 40% social housing. Now, there is no doubt that anybody who read any document of any kind in relation to Manydown would have picked up the information that 40% was our objective. So, having heard the idea that somebody might suggest 5% social housing would be good enough, I researched, or should I say, I got somebody to research for me what the Mayor of London has done. And he has shared this with all the London boroughs. He has developed supplementary planning guidance to enable people to challenge developers in order to get the correct level of social housing or affordable housing on developments. And not only that, he's given a template to all borough councils, London boroughs and others, of how to do it. And I'd recommend that you read it, because it does give us the template to achieve the mechanism that we're looking for, 40% social housing, affordable housing. And I'm quite prepared to give one of you a copy of this. And you can copy it to all your colleagues. And a cabinet member, of course, would have the opportunity and the authority to do all that. So this is an invitation. Let me just finish by referring to our experience of Manydown and the High Court. We ended up in the High Court in 2012 when we got to the point where we were pretending that we were different bodies when we were sitting as a planning authority or sitting as a council developing policy. The High Court judge said, "You're conning yourselves, you're one body." So we are one body. We have a policy. We published it. We've reinforced it. And so we should go forward on the basis of getting the best deal out of Manydown for the whole of the population, a good build and big housing for poorer people. Thank you.
Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This administration has consistently stated that it is committed to delivering 40% affordable at Manydown. We recognise our special responsibilities to meet the need to provide not only new homes that are well designed and well built, but that are also affordable and meet the different requirements of our residents, whether they be young people, families or older citizens. Over the past 5 years, there's been a good deal of excellent cross-party working together in bringing forward this vital project for the borough. The work of the Manydown project team has benefited from the ideas and challenges put forward constructively by councillors, especially those who served on the MOC. It's been an example of Basingstoke councillors at their best. In response to this motion, this administration is again prepared to reassure councillors Harvey and Keating and full council of our commitment to the objective of 40% affordable at Manydown. The second paragraph of the motion, as written, however, with a reference to non-negotiable in relation to existing or potential partners, however, would not be in the best interests of this borough. We have suggested an amendment to this part of the motion, but that which we felt met the requirements of the Labour Party, but they turned it down. If we vote to make the strict definition of affordable housing as defined by the local plan non-negotiable now and in the future, we're at risk of doing a number of things that could prevent the very thing we want to see, all of us, 40% affordable. First, we should remember that we are not sole but joint owners of Manydown. Non-negotiable is not the language of true partnership. We've worked well over the past 5 years with our joint partners, Hampshire County Council, and that needs to continue. We must continue to act in accordance with the legal agreement we have with the Manydown Company. Do we want to risk another judicial review by giving the Manydown Company cause to think that we are not committed to delivering a financially viable development? Similarly, we need to ensure whoever is our chosen private sector partner, they have sufficient confidence that in meeting our shared objectives of a high quality development with the huge infrastructure investment that will be involved, they can do so with every prospect of achieving a suitable level of profit. May I remind councillors that we are at a critical stage of selecting our preferred private sector partner. This motion risks being interpreted as a change at this crucial final stage in the tendering process for a Manydown private sector partner. Public sector tendering rules are suitably strict. In the Manydown tender documentation issued when we went out to secure a private sector partner, the requirement to achieve 40% affordable in accordance with the local plan was made clear, and that's been reinforced throughout. It was not stated to be non-negotiable. Do councillors tonight want to appear to change the evaluation criteria and thereby put at risk all the work done over the past 5 years with this reckless motion? Do you want to play with fire and invite unsuccessful bidders to make claims against us because members sought to change the tender rules at the 11th hour? Or for one or more of the final bidders to back out now because we are seeking to make this change? This is precisely what you would be endangering by voting for this motion: uncertainty and additional risk. Second, as a council, how can we realistically say that our commitment to 40% affordable is non-negotiable in terms, as the motion states, of any existing or potential partners? This council should not, and I suggest cannot lawfully, seek to bind itself in perpetuity. It has to be open to review decisions if there is a change in circumstances, not least in government policy. For a project that will be delivered over many years, this is a fundamental problem with the motion before councillors. Third, by tying ourselves so strictly to 70% rented, 30% intermediate, we may be ruling out opportunities that may be offered in the future by private sector partners to agree to broaden the range of different types of housing to include shared equity, rent-to-buy, starter homes, low-cost home ownership, housing for the elderly, as well as rented accommodation. This is consistent with our council's own housing and homelessness strategy. Why would we want to impede our ability to do the best for our residents by being inflexible?
You've used your 5 minutes up. To quickly finish.
I will, thank you, yes. This motion could wreck these shared objectives, putting back Many Downs development for many years and ruining our carefully nurtured reputation as a good development partner. Labour says we should build more homes for residents. Agreed. I am staggered by this motion. It's playing politics and I'll be voting against it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Westbrook. Michael, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, it was at Many Down House in November 1802 where Jane Austen, the novelist, received her only marriage proposal. The son of Mr. Bigwither, owner of the house, took a great liking to Jane when she visited the residence. And although she'd intended to stay for several days, upon this proposal, she immediately asked to return home to Steventon, then sent a message declining the proposal. Now, if Jane were around today, she may not have returned to Steventon. She may have stayed on in Many Down, married Mr. Bigwither's son, settled down in a very nice, policy-compliant, affordable home on the Many Down estate. But not if she'd listened to the party opposite. Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure said in November 2014, "I can't give a commitment that we are committed to 40% because it simply won't be built if we did that." Another Cabinet Member, in a letter to the Gazette in March 2015, said, "I'm sure our residents would prefer that their political representatives work together on Many Down in the public interest. Accusations that we don't support 40% affordable housing at Many Down are wrong and mischievous." Yet, a month later, when addressing our motion of securing 40% affordable housing on Many Down, told councillors that he would not be voting for this dangerous motion. It seems he hasn't changed his mind. At last full council, we debated SIL and the impact the new rate could have on delivering affordable homes on Many Down. Members opposite reassured us of their commitment to 40%. Promises were made by the Cabinet Member for the Planning and Infrastructure, the rest of the Cabinet and the Leader himself. In fact, all the members opposite who said they genuinely wanted that for the borough. So it came as a real surprise to me when nearing the end of that debate that one of them said they're only aiming for 40%. Even during last week's EPH committee, we heard the same Conservatives repeating their aspirations. The Cabinet Member's view is 40%. It's our ambition. It's what we want to deliver. Whether it's possible, I don't know yet, and we are going to try to support. Plenty of platitudes and plenty of promises. Aims are admirable, we all have them. But to deny our residents the opportunity of 40% on something that this council has control over would be in itself would be aimless. We're finding that teachers, police officers, nurses and other workers cannot afford housing near their workplaces. With adequate affordable housing, the people who make our communities work can live near their jobs. In order to promote economic and social diversity, our communities need to provide homes for all families, and Many Down's no exception. Councillor Harvey, back in 2015, made a plea to fellow councillors that we need to show the commitment to residents who sold their council houses and that this is not about making shed loads of money for companies. Let's face it, if we cannot commit to this on public-owned land, how on earth can we expect private developers to do it on land they own in the future? In May this year, the new leader of the Tory group said in the press he believed as joint landowners with Hampshire County Council, the Borough Council should ensure developers are going the extra mile to provide quality new builds. As Many Down is publicly owned land, surely there is an opportunity for the Borough and the County Council to take extra steps to ensure problems that have been experienced in the past are not repeated on land that we are going to develop. I do hope tonight the Tory group follows their leaders' sentiments and helps ensure developers do take those extra steps and do go that extra mile by supporting our motion.
Councillor Mark Raffel, please, next.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The reason I oppose this motion is it is contrary to the local plan. It's contrary to the local plan because the wording of the local plan, which was created with the support and the guidance and a lot of discussion with various members. Not all of them voted for it in its final incarnation, but they did assist with the wording. Says that the council will require 40% affordable housing on all market housing sites. In seeking affordable housing provision, the council will have regard to the current viability of developments, including land values and other development costs. The applicant will be required to submit an open book viability assessment where schemes do not meet the above policy requirements. In such cases, the council will commission an independent review of the viability study for which the applicant will bear the cost. Such proposals will only be acceptable where the viability case is accepted by the local planning authority and the approach contributes towards creating mixed and balanced communities. We have Councillor Harvey to thank for some of that wording. I can say he deserves the credit because he did assist, not exactly every single word, but a significant amount of it in correspondence and in debate. The supporting text goes on to say the Council acknowledges that the viability of schemes varies over time and with locations. So the amount of affordable housing sought will be negotiated based on economic viability, and the policy represents the starting point for discussions. And that's our policy. And all planning applications will be judged against this policy. Councillor Isaac has dealt with the landowner. I'm dealing with the policy. And the key words there, represents the starting point for discussions, as approved by the inspector. Now, Mr. Mayor, it will perhaps be a surprise to you to learn that back in July 2013, Councillor Harvey and I were in email correspondence on a more regular basis than we are currently. This is the famous I was in the garden and thought of something, for those of you who are on the council. Remember that? Yes, you remember that. I got ridiculed a bit about it, but we all came fine in the end. Because we got the plan through. And in one of the emails from Councillor Harvey, where he was giving me quite sensible suggestions about why 50% affordable housing would be appropriate, and he gave me a number of examples, all of which I considered, and of course I kept his email, which said this. He said, each authority above has undertaken a far more detailed analysis and understanding of their local housing market, such that they all justify up to 50% affordable housing as a starting point. A bit further down, the same quotation says the valuations can and do, even in the most difficult of circumstances, justify a policy of 50% as a starting point. And then in the fourth paragraph, in essence guaranteeing at least some affordable housing on all sites, but the accepted starting point is 50%. And then on the second page, we believe that 50% affordable as a starting point is justifiable and can be defended. We have time before an EIP to explore the evidence and support such a policy with far better analysis. So he uses the word starting point. The policy has the word starting point. Never did he use the phrase non-negotiable. And it's always been understood what a starting point is. And as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not just a lawyer saying this, the starting point is not the same as the destination, unless you're standing on the North Pole, I suppose, and trying to go for a walk. As far as I'm concerned, they're two different things. And that's why this is coming as such a shock. Because we've had all of this discussion, we've been through an inspection. Yes, 50% wasn't agreed and their submissions weren't accepted by the inspector, but 40% was agreed as a starting point. And that's where we are. So to suddenly turn around and say it's non-negotiable is actually saying what the destination is. It starts at 40%, it ends at 40%, and it's never going to be anything but 40%. So that's contrary to policy. And in my submission, it won't get through, any planning application won't get through with that if we start changing things now. So I would respectfully ask the Council to reject this motion, and perhaps, members can decide whether they think there's an element of, or the reason for why this has come about now. I'm not worried about that. I just ask members to reject this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Pearce is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief. We've had in the past members opposite suggesting that this side of the chamber don't know what profit is. Well, I think we do, and I think also that this is all about profit. And isn't it a little ironic that the local plan, if it was a developer coming to us asking to build, we would be insisting on compliance. So why do we not insist on our own compliance? If we don't do this, it's possible that Section 106 or SIL monies wouldn't be achievable either, and we're going to go down that road as well. We've supported, and I certainly personally have supported the Manydown development with our residents in Buckskin, and we've told them that it does have a benefit. It now seems that the future holds very little benefit for members in wards like mine. Surely the philosophy will be to create an exemplar with enormous profit, then use that profit to plough money into or better invest in our own development or affordable or even social housing. Bizarre at best and at worst hypocritical.
I've got Gavin James, then Tristan Robinson and David Potter, and we're fast running out of time, so people can be quick, be helpful.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be supporting this very, very sensible and undangerous motion. I think the dangerousness is not supporting it. We have a very large piece of land. Obviously, the public sector owns half of the land, or has the say over half of the land, and if we can't deliver 40%, every single private developer on all the other large sites has a great idea, come to planning, say we can't deliver 40%, clearly it's not possible, you couldn't either, and we'd be rather stuck with that. So I think anyone who doesn't support this motion is putting in jeopardy the delivery of 40% houses across the borough, and that means less housing going to the local people, the people who need the housing and need the affordable housing, and more housing on the open market. So I think I'd correct Councillor Isaac, he's the one being dangerous, we're not. The second thing I'll say is about the mention of our partnership with the Manydown Company. The Manydown Company are absolutely committed to delivering 40%. It's not an aim, it's not an objective. They're actually committed to it, they've agreed to it. And I'll tell you how I know this, I've never spoken to them, but when we did our draft local plan, you remember that Manydown wasn't in it. Now, the policy of 40% was in it, very clearly in it. The Manydown Company, knowing that 40% was in it, took us to court. They took us to court to make sure they were in the local plan with the policy of 40%. Now that means they got into this knowing exactly what the value of their land was, that the value of their land would be influenced by the fact that it's got to deliver 40%. So we have no problems there. They agree with us. The Conservatives voted for a local plan that has a commitment to 40%. Now, I do agree, perhaps when Councillor Harvey was talking about 50%, that it was a starting point, and I think there should be some flexibility, and I'd rather see the words provide a minimum of 40%. So the opportunity is there, if we make a bit of profit, to plough back in, maybe hit 42, 43, but absolutely the minimum 40%. Now we've got the problem of we've started this procedure, this process of procuring a partner. And I appreciate that that's a bit awkward. I've always maintained that 40% should have been from day one. It shouldn't have been an aim or an objective or an idea or a wish list. It should have been a red line. And I think myself, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Potter sat on Manydown Overview Scrutiny Committee saying it should be a red line, not in the aims and objectives. But there we are. It wasn't included. If the cost is putting back procuring a partner by 6 months, by 12 months, then that's unfortunate. It's a real pain. We've waited long enough to get Manydown on the agenda. But the consequences of not doing that, the consequences of missing 40%, remain forever. Because long after we've all gone, and there's a different set of councillors, in 100 years' time, we will all be gone, and someone will be left with Manydown, our big opportunity to provide housing for the next generation, and we'd have failed them if we haven't delivered 40%. So I will support this motion. I think it's absolutely critical we deliver a minimum of 40%. I'd hope with modern build technology, flat pack housing and that kind of thing, we could go beyond 40% and get closer to Councillor Harvey's 50, but anywhere between 40 and 50 is fine. Less than 40, totally unacceptable, would represent a failure of the administration.
Tristan Robinson's next. Got just over a minute left.
Sorry?
Just over a minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if we've only got a minute left, I will be incredibly brief. Taking on Councillor Isaac and Councillor Fell's points, we are absolutely committed to delivering 40% affordable housing as per the local plan. We need to make sure that we have the right level of affordable housing across our town, not just on Manydown, but on all of the local plan sites. What we cannot do is change the terms with private sector partners at the 11th hour of negotiations, which would risk the delivery of Manydown in its entirety. So to that end, under 8.12 of the Constitution on Council Procedure Rules, I would like to amend the motion, deleting the last paragraph and putting in, for its own part, Council reaffirms this commitment to deliver 40% affordable housing on Manydown, consistent with the affordable housing policy in the adopted local plan and the adopted BDBC housing and homelessness strategy. Council notes that this commitment has been made clear to all of our potential partners throughout the procurement process. Thank you.
Sir Harvey.
As much as I would love to accept the amendment as proposed, I can't, because your amendment negates the point of the motion we put. The point of the motion that we put contains specific wording, non-negotiable, unequivocal. Your amendment does not. Therefore, you change fundamentally the point of the motion I'm putting. I respect what you're trying to do, I understand that, but the motion has been worded in the way it was for a purpose. If I accept this, you totally undermine the point of the motion we've put, because that second paragraph is written in the way it's written.
Can I come back on that very briefly?
Yeah.
If that is the proposer of the motion's wish, then that is absolutely fine, but I do find it regrettable that we cannot stick to our local plan policy. When we're dealing with partners, we have to stick with policy. We cannot stick with what full council might decide on a very long evening in July. That's not how it works. We're at the 11th hour negotiations with private sector partners. We need to stick to policy, and it's regrettable that the proposers of motion aren't prepared to stick to that policy.
Councillor Harvey, to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually talking about us as landowner in this. I'm not talking about the LPA side of it. I'm talking about us as landowner. We own Manydown in partnership. That's the fundamental point. This authority, in the public interest, owns Manydown with others and partners, the Manydown Company and Hampshire County Council. Half of Manydown in that context is publicly owned. That is a fundamental part of the conversation we should be having here. And the point is, Mr. Mayor, what do we want? We want a clear commitment. We want the land to be developed for the purposes for which it was bought. We want cross-party working, and we've had cross-party working. The problem is, what is actually now going on in the negotiations? What is actually going on in the procurement process, where the 40% is at risk? Where are we in this, where the commitments, the conversations, the absolute that was given has gone wrong? The message we send out to developers is, we want to commit ourselves, but we expect you to comply. There is nothing wrong with us doing that as the landowner, and that should be what's going on in those negotiations. And if it isn't, there should be a damn good reason why not, and we need to look at what's going on there. We need to listen to the development industry in our town when they say that the affordable housing issues are genuine and real, and therein the prize that Manydown is as a publicly owned largest site in Basingstoke becomes absolutely critical to what we're doing here. It's 22 years since we purchased Manydown. And here we are tonight saying to those residents that actually agreed to sell their council houses, not by a very large amount, may I say, by the same amount that we voted for Brexit was the vote to go with the council house sales. That's how close it was. But they were given a commitment that this council on Manydown would build affordable housing, would use the money wisely in that context. There is nothing wrong as landowner to do that appropriately and giving it full commitment. The viability point, Mr. Mayor, the final point I want to make, the viability point is really important here. Are we really saying, as a landowner, that we're willing to give ourselves a get-out-of-jail card, and we are willing to give the partner who we would seek to develop with a get-out-of-jail card on the 40% affordable housing? What absolute hypocrites we would therein be on publicly owned land. Who are we doing this development for? Who are we actually building all these houses for? Who are we supposedly developing a brand new community, an urban extension to Basingstoke for? Who are we doing this for? It's not the private bidders or the private developers. It's not profit over affordable housing. It should not be profit over affordable housing. And it shouldn't be ruling out opportunities to deliver what our residents need, 40% affordable housing. And can I just say, 40% or 50%? It sure as hell isn't 5 or 15%. That's a dramatic change. So what are you really saying, and where are you really going with this? If there's cross-party, that's fine, but it's on 40%. If there isn't, then there's a real question to be asked about what's been going on behind the scenes.
Councillor Cousins. Okay. Those in favour of the motion. The vote is now open. Councillor Parker hasn't voted. Councillor Parker, you haven't voted yet. Everyone's voted.
Yeah, it's just you.
Okay, the vote is now closed. That is lost 29 to 24. So the next agenda item is to receive on block the minutes. Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The council meeting of the 18th of May, 8147, page 8147 of the minute book, top of the page. I asked whether officers could review the number of borough councillors entitled to sit on the Standards Committee with a view to increasing the number of voting members. The Mayor stated that a written response would be provided. It hasn't, Mr Mayor.
That's the leader to answer. Can the leader answer the question, please? Or didn't you?
It's a very simple question answer, Mr Mayor. No, I can't. I just think it's not a question for me.
This is what... The answer
I think you just say we'll look into it and ensure you're provided with an answer.
We'll look into it and we're sure you are provided an answer. And any other questions on minutes? Are they agreed on block? Now to questions. Got one question from Councillor Diane Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, as on the order paper.
Thank you. Councillor Terry Reid to answer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Taylor for her question. Completely agree. As the Mayor mentioned earlier, reclaiming Jane back to her home borough has been a remarkable success and has generated national and international press coverage for Basingstoke. I'd like to add my thanks also to yours, Mr Mayor. The original idea was proposed by Dr Michael Fremantle. This was picked up by Maria Miller, who formed a steering group. The work has taken several years and it's involved many partners, probably too many to list here, but I think special mention should go to the project lead, Amanda Aldous, and to the Countess Portsmouth, who arranged funding. And I think it's really important for everyone to note that funding was by public subscription, so it was all funded by donations. The whole of the sculpture was produced that way. So a huge thank you to everyone who donated to that and to the people of Basingstoke and Dean who ensured that Jane came home. And of course a massive congratulations to local boy Adam Round, the sculptor, who has produced and designed something truly beautiful. Jane has come home and is already much loved. As you said, Mr Mayor, she is constantly surrounded by admirers. The people of Basingstoke and Dean have taken her to their hearts, and she's also attracting international visitors and already an increased footfall around the top of town. Celebrating Jane Austen is a huge opportunity for the whole borough. The sculpture, the book benches that we've had during the summer as well, which are wonderful, and also the delightful Steventon phone box, which has been converted into an information point for Jane Austen, have really put us on the map, and I think everyone involved is to be very much congratulated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon?
Point of information, Mr. Mayor. Just to correct some information in the letter from Councillor Taylor. I think you find Jane Austen was born in Steventon and not Basingstoke, as in and that's in our ward. And it would have been nice to, as a ward councillor, to be invited to this Doctor Who event where you were in the phone box, but I didn't get an invite.
Councillor Diane Taylor, have you got a supplementary question? Yeah, no. Councillor Diane Taylor, have you got a supplementary question? Okay. Councillor Westbrook.
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, maybe Councillor Reid might be able to help me with this one. I'm not actually sure. Many of my residents have been asking, was Jane actually that size?
Yeah. If Councillor Terry Reid would like to answer that.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was about 5'2" and very slight. And just to answer also through you, Mr. Mayor, your question, the invitations weren't sent by Basingstoke and Dean for the phone box. They were sent from Steventon Parish Council.
Thank you. Just before we finished, something I've missed off the announcements earlier. I did actually see Maria Miller today and thank her and say that we would bring the subject up in my mayor's announcements. So I just thought I'd pass that on as well. And with that, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you.